The lawyer set down her pen and looked at me the way you look at a man who orders dessert inside a burning building. 400,000, Lin Xin said, for a garment factory that has lost money 2 years running. You have not seen the building. You have not seen the machines. You have not read past the summary page. I read the summary page. That is exactly my point. I signed anyway. The pen was one of those cheap hotel things that skips, so my name came out looking like a lie detector result, and across the table the seller, a soft balding man named Sun Hao, was trying so hard not to smile that his whole face had gone into spasm. He had been shopping that factory around for 8 months. He had come in expecting to be beaten down to 200. He had brought a folder of counter-arguments. He never opened it. Should we not at least negotiate? He asked, in the tone of a man who cannot believe his luck and is now worried it is a trap. Negotiating takes time, I said. I do not have time. Here is the thing I could not tell either of them, then or ever, and it is the reason I have spent the last year of my life quietly destroying everything I own. 2 days earlier, a voice had turned up in my skull and informed me that I was now the host of something it called a system. The pitch sounded fantastic for about 9 seconds. It hands you company money, a lot of it. That morning, it had handed me 1,000,000 yuan and dropped it into an account with my company's name on it, and I sat in my rented room staring at 7 figures like a man who has just been handed a live grenade with the pin already out. Because the money is not mine. The money is the company's. The only way any of it becomes mine is at something the system calls settlement, and settlement works like this. When the clock runs out, it looks at what is left in the fund. If I have spent it down to nearly nothing, the whole original amount converts into my personal account. Real money, mine, spendable on rent and noodles and a life. If there is anything meaningful left over, I get 0.1% of what I manage to spend, which is the financial equivalent of being handed a receipt and a handshake. So the job is simple. Spend it all, every fen, before the clock hits 0, and before you say it, yes, I tried all of it. Give the money away, buy stocks, buy crypto, pay myself a salary, hand it to a friend, set it on fire in a parking lot. The system has a list, and the list is thorough, and it says no before I can even finish the thought. Company expenses only, no deliberate sabotage, no paying myself, and the one that eventually ruined my life more thoroughly than all the others put together. The rule I did not think about at all that first week. The rule that was sitting there in plain language the whole time. Every yuan the company earns goes straight back into the fund. Read that again. I had to. The better my company does, the more money I have to destroy. Profit is not a reward. Profit is homework. A successful business is a leak in the boat, and I had just bought a boat specifically because the man selling it swore it was sinking. Lin Xin slid the contract into her bag and pushed her glasses up. She drives a Mercedes. I had ridden here in it because I did not own a car or a suit or a chair that did not wobble. 400,000 transferred, she said, watching her phone. Then she stopped watching her phone and started watching me. Already. Instantly. Mr. Guo, most buyers stage the payment. Staging is also time. And my fee? 50,000. My quote was 30. 50, I said, and it went out before she could argue, and I sat there in a coffee shop drinking a 38 yuan Americano I resented, 550,000 yuan lighter, feeling the specific joy of a man watching a burden slide off a cliff. She looked at me for a long moment. I could see her building a theory about me, and I could see that the theory was rich idiot, and I let her have it. It was going to be the single most durable misunderstanding of my life. The factory found out I existed about 40 minutes later, and it found out badly. Guo Ming was the one who broke it. He was a dark, wiry kid from the cutting floor with a voice that carried across 200 sewing machines, and he came through the workshop door at a dead sprint yelling that the boss had sold the factory. 20-odd people stopped working at once. The noise dropped so fast it hurt. Sun Yang was the one who put out the fire. He was maybe 30, sales, white shirt every single day, the sort of man who irons things. He climbed onto a stool and told everyone that ownership changing hands means nothing, that the machines still run, that the orders still ship, calm down and go back to work. Then who pays this month? Guo Ming said. Silence again, but a different flavor, because Sun Hao had not paid them. He had been sitting on a month of wages for 20 people while shopping the factory around, and the plan, obviously, was to hand me the keys and be in another province before anyone counted the days. I would like to tell you I felt righteous fury about this. What I actually felt, walking through the front gate for the first time and seeing the sign hanging over the door, was joy. The sign was a disaster. Sun bleached to the color of weak tea, cracked straight down the middle, and one character had lost its bottom half so that the factory name read as something that is not a word. The wall underneath had shed its plaster incontinence. There was a section by the gate where you could see 3 separate previous colors, like a geological cross-section of other people's optimism. The gate itself did not close properly and had been tied with wire, and the wire had been there long enough to rust into the frame. I stood in front of it for a genuinely embarrassing amount of time. Something to spend money on, I thought. A sign, a proper lit one, the kind with a box and a transformer and an electrician, and rendering, and a gate, and possibly the whole frontage. I waited for the system to object, the way it had objected to 11 other ideas that week, and it said nothing at all, and I stood in a dead industrial park in July feeling something close to religious relief. Then a man in a security booth I had not noticed slid his window open and asked who I was. I bought it. He looked at the sign, then at me, then back at the sign. Why? Something to spend money on, I thought, and waited for the system to object, and it did not object, and I nearly hugged the wall. Then I got inside and found the lobby full of people, and Sun Hao in the middle of them doing an award-worthy impression of a man who does not understand the question. He kept looking at Sun Yang and giving him this tiny wink like they were in on something together. Lin Xin took him apart in about 90 seconds. Wages accrued before the transfer are the seller's liability. Labor arbitration will cost you more than the wages. The clock on that starts today. He was still wriggling. So I helped. I sent you 400,000 about an hour ago, I said. I think you can cover it. He paid. 80, 90,000 across 20-odd people, counted out with the expression of a man being fed his own shoes. And then I asked for a second table. Lin Xin actually said what out loud. The staff just stared. I sat up next to Sun Hao with a calculator and a laptop, and I explained it in the friendliest voice I own. He pays you for last month. I pay you for next month. Next month has not happened, Lin Xin said. Then I will pay in advance. The system let me go exactly 1 month ahead. I checked. I had checked several times, the way you check that the stove is off. Sun Yang came first. Sun Hao handed him 7,870 for last month. Base 3,000 plus commission. Base 3,000, I said. That is low. Let us call it 4,000, plus 1% of what you sell. I transferred 4,000 while he was still holding the last envelope. He looked at the phone. He looked at me, and something happened in his face that I have thought about a lot since, because it was the exact moment my life became difficult. He did not look grateful. He looked activated. I found out later what he was thinking. He was thinking that a boss who pays like that will finally let him stop selling the garbage fabric that had been chasing customers away for 2 years. He was thinking that he could finally do his job properly. He was already, in that moment, planning to make me money. Then it was a conveyor belt. A cutter named Guo Fenghua came second. Sun Hao counted her out 4,200 for the previous month, on a base of 2,800 that had not moved in 4 years. Base 3,005, I said. Attendance bonus of 400 on top, and it does not lapse if you take a day off. She did not move. You are paying, she said carefully, for a month that has not happened. Yes. And if I leave in 2 weeks? Then you will have been paid for 2 weeks you did not work, and I will have been wrong about you. She looked at Sun Hao. Sun Hao was studying the table, then a man from packing, then 2 from the cutting floor, then the woman who makes the sample garments, then the cleaner, who tried to leave the queue twice on the grounds that she was not really staff and was retrieved both times by the person behind her. Every person in that lobby got paid twice inside 3 minutes, once by the man leaving and once by the man arriving. The second payment was always bigger. It always came with a number that had gone up. By the 8th person, nobody was talking. They were watching their phone screens. By the 15th, somebody at the back had started crying, quietly, the way people do when they have been carrying something for a long time and did not choose the moment to put it down. Sun Hao sat 2 feet from me through all of it, paying out his own arrears, ears going steadily redder, and when it was finished, he asked whether he could leave. He got as far as the door, then turned around and asked, in a small voice, why I had done it that way. The honest answer is that I had a month of payroll to burn and 48 hours to burn it in, and that setting up beside him cost me nothing extra. It seemed efficient, I said. It cost me a little over 100,000 yuan, and I would pay it again tomorrow. 423,700 left. 20 people, 1 dead sign, and 48 hours on the clock. Sun Hao fled the moment his last envelope was empty. I turned to Sun Yang. What does this place need right now? Urgently. Fabric, he said, immediately, like a man who has been holding the answer in his mouth for 2 years. The last owner bought the cheap stuff. Customers touch it once and never call back. 80,000 would fix us for the season. Only 80? He blinked. Good fabric would be 150. Take 200,000, I said. You have 2 days. Do not bring me back a single fen. He stood there. I watched a grown man in an ironed shirt get emotional about textiles. 223,700. And I still had the workshop to walk through, which is where the real find was waiting. The workshop was a furnace, 500 square meters under a metal roof in July, no air conditioning, one sad little fan bolted above every station pushing hot air sideways, and 26 people sewing in a heat you could lean against. A woman near the door had a towel around her neck that was completely soaked, not damp, soaked the way a towel is when it has been used, wrung out and used again. There were 4 thermoses lined up on the windowsill, and every one of them was empty. Nobody complained. That is the part that got me. I walked the whole floor and nobody looked up and nobody said anything, because complaining about the heat in a garment workshop in July is like complaining about the sea being wet. Why is there no air conditioning? Sun Young looked at me as though I had asked why there is no swimming pool. For a floor this size, a central unit is 100,000 yuan minimum, and then the electricity every month. Every month. He said it as a warning. He was warning me off. He was doing his job, protecting his new boss from an unnecessary capital expense, and my heart did a small delighted skip in my chest. Recurring cost. Permanent. Every single month, forever, rising in summer, and no way to switch it off once people have felt it. Take the rest, I said. All of it. 223,700 yuan, air conditioning and a new sign, the lit kind, the expensive one. Do not leave me a single fen. There was a pause on that floor. Mr. Guo, Sun Yang said, that is everything you have. I am aware. You have owned this factory for 4 hours. I am aware of that too. The woman with the towel had stopped her machine. So had the 2 either side of her, and the number was so specific, 223,700, that within a day, the entire workshop had decided it was the product of a detailed calculation involving projected returns, when in fact it was simply the exact contents of my pocket. Why is there no air conditioning? Central unit for a floor this size, Sun Yang said. 100,000 minimum, and then the electricity every month. Every month. He said it like a warning. My heart did a small happy skip. Take the rest, I said, all of it. 223,700, air conditioning and a new sign, the lit kind. Get the expensive one. Do not leave me a fen. The number was so specific that the whole floor decided I had calculated it to the last coin with some invisible master plan, when in truth it was simply everything I had. Guoming volunteered to handle the air conditioning because his sister sells units and his brother-in-law installs them. He walked around for the rest of that day like a man carrying a state secret, and then he said the thing that should have been a fire alarm. The boss keeps putting money in, he said, but we have no orders. We are going to be standing around. So sew samples out of the good fabric, Sun Yang said. I will go find orders. I heard that. I heard it clearly. I was walking away at the time and I remember thinking, that is nice. That is team spirit, and I did not process a single word of it. That night I went home to my building, which Lin Xin had insisted on seeing, and which broke something in her. 7 floors, no elevator, 600 a month, and I had paid 4,000 up front for half a year because paying up front is faster. On the 4th landing there was a couple screaming at each other above me, the kind of fight where you can hear the exact shape of the money problem underneath the words. And on the stairs below, a man was sitting with an unlit cigarette in his hand, not smoking it, just holding it, in the dark, the way people do when they have already quit, and the quitting is not the hard part. I stepped around him. He moved his knees so I could pass and said sorry. I said no problem. That was Pan Long, and I did not know it yet, but that unlit cigarette was going to end up mattering more to me than every yuan in the fund. The next 2 days went beautifully. Sun Yang bought fabric. Guo Ming went to the sign shop and was told a lit box sign takes a week minimum, and he called me in a panic, and I told him the delivery date does not matter. Pay them today, all of it, no deposits. The sign man asked him to repeat that twice. The air conditioning went in overnight because Guo Ming's brother-in-law worked until 3 in the morning, and Guo Ming stood there the whole time because a man had handed him 200,000 yuan and he was not going to sleep through it. By the last afternoon my fund read 231 yuan. 231 out of a million. That is a rounding error. That is a full conversion. That is 1,000,000 yuan sliding into my personal account in 23 minutes. I sat in my terrible chair and watched the countdown and did the thing I am embarrassed about now, which is that I started planning what to buy. 15 minutes. I got up and made tea I did not want. I sat back down. I checked that the window was closed, which is not a thing that affects anything. 10. I started drafting a message to Lin Xin about buying a flat. Then deleted it because you do not tell your lawyer you are about to have 1,000,000 yuan before you have it. 5. I thought about my parents. Specifically, I thought about the fact that my mother has worn the same winter coat for 9 years and describes it as still perfectly good, and about what it would be like to simply buy her a new one without a conversation about it. 3. And the number changed. 231 became 40,231. I looked at it. I did the thing where your brain refuses the input and requests it again. I refreshed a panel that exists inside my own skull, which is not a thing you can do, but I tried. Deposit received, customer prepayment, settlement complete, converted amount 0. Personal assets, 3,287 yuan. I had gone down. I had started the week with 3,500 and I ended it with 3,200 because I had bought lunch. A million yuan evaporated in front of me because somebody did his job well and a client was happy enough to wire the deposit early. New fund, 2 million. New settlement period, 2 weeks. The system delivered this the way a doctor tells you the good news is you have plenty of time. Then my phone rang and it was Sun Yang and he was so happy I could hear his teeth. Mr. Guo, did the 40,000 come through? They liked the samples. They paid ahead of schedule. There was a long pause on my end, long enough that he asked if I was still there. Sun Yang, I said. I will remember this. He told Guo Ming afterward that the boss had sounded moved. I want to be very clear about my emotional state at this point because everything I did for the next year grows out of it. I was not angry at Sun Yang. Sun Yang is a good man. Sun Yang irons his shirts and knows fabric weights by touch and would take a bullet for a co-worker. That is the problem. That is the entire problem. My enemy was not a rival or a villain or a man in a nice suit trying to ruin me. My enemy was competence. My enemy was 20 people who had finally been treated decently and had decided, quietly and without telling me, to pay me back. So I made a plan, and the plan had 2 halves. Half 1, spend faster. Half 2, and this is the half that turned me into the man I am now, stop them from earning. I started small. I told Sun Yang to paint the office walls instead of visiting clients. A senior salesman, on a ladder, with a roller. He did it without a word of complaint, and I later learned he assumed I was testing his humility. I decided to hire people, not good people. I needed a sales department that could not sell and an assistant who had never assisted anything. And on the stairs that evening, I passed the Pan family again. The wife was handing her husband a thermos and telling him not to rush, that work would turn up, and Pan Long was nodding and holding that thermos with both hands, and I went up to my apartment and sat in the dark for a while. The next morning, I asked Guo Ming what the workshop needed. Honestly? He looked around, lowered his voice. Social insurance, and the housing fund. Starting next month, we pay both, in full. I have never seen a room go off like that. A woman 2 stations down actually sat down on the floor. Somebody said out loud that the people who quit last year were going to chew through their own elbows when they heard. Then came a beautiful comic silence in which it emerged that not one person in that building, including me, knew what documents you need to file for social insurance. Look it up, I said with enormous authority. That evening, Sun Yang and Guo Ming went to a barbecue place and had the conversation that ruined my next settlement. I know exactly what was said because they cheerfully told me later, both of them, at length, with the shining eyes of men expecting a bonus. Sun Yang complained. The boss will not let me near a client. The boss puts me on a ladder. The boss is blocking me. And Guo Ming, who is genuinely bright, which is the tragedy of it, put down his skewer and solved it. He is not blocking you. He is pointing at something. What is sitting in the back warehouse doing nothing? The dead stock. 10,000 odd pieces of returned and defective clothing from the old owner, stacked in bags, worth nothing, taking up space. Sun Yang's face lit up. Of course. The boss had been gesturing at it all along, too classy to say it out loud. Clear the warehouse. Move it at 5-6 yuan a piece to the night market stalls. Should we tell him? Sun Yang said. No, said Guo Ming. Let it be a surprise. I hope you can appreciate that this bomb sat in my building for 11 days, and I walked past it twice a day and once helped carry the bags. Meanwhile, I went hunting for bad employees, and instead I met Xinhua. The job fair was a barn full of noise, and I had the worst booth in it, a corner table, a sheet of paper with the company name written by hand, and me, asleep on my own arm. 2 girls stopped in front of it, and I heard one say that there was not even a printed poster, so it was probably a scam. Xinhua woke me up. She did it by standing next to the table and saying, "Excuse me," at increasing volume 5 times, and when that failed, by tapping the table twice, and when that failed, by saying it once more in the specific tone of a person who has decided this is her last attempt of the day. I came up off my own arm with a dead hand and a line of biro on my cheek. She was an intern, no experience. And she had been going down that row all morning asking every recruiter the same question, which was whether the company would be willing to pay her first salary a little early, and every single one of them had told her to get lost, one of them loudly. She asked me the same question inside the first 30 seconds, before qualifications, before the job description, before she knew what the company did. Can the salary be paid early? How early? She had clearly rehearsed a defensive answer for this, and had to discard it. A week, she said. Half a month if possible. I know it is not normal. I can sign anything you want about it. Then she waited 20 full minutes while the blood came back into my arm and did not fill the silence and did not look at her phone, which is a thing almost nobody can do. Her resume was a miracle. 2 internships, neither finished, both ended early for reasons she described honestly rather than well. No skills listed, no experience. Not one line on that page capable of generating revenue for any organization on Earth. Perfect, I thought. How much do you want? 3,000? She said it like a question. Then she watched my face and misread it entirely because I had frowned, and the frown was because 3,000 is far too little. 2,000 is fine, she said quickly. I frowned harder. 1,500. Stop. She stopped, and she looked ready to offer to work for the experience. I want you to remember that this is a person who had gone to a job fair to ask if she could be paid early and had been laughed at and was now bidding herself down in real time in front of a stranger asleep on a table. 6,000, I said. The system caps me at 30% above market rate. 6 was the absolute ceiling, and I went straight to it, and she sat there with her mouth slightly open, and I felt like an absolute genius. I had just hired the most terrifyingly competent human being I have ever employed, on the grounds that she had nothing to offer. She waited a full 20 minutes while the blood came back into my arm before she started talking, which tells you something about her. Her resume was a miracle. 2 internships that did not finish. No skills, no experience, nothing on the page that could possibly generate revenue for anyone. Perfect, I thought, and I do not think I have ever been more wrong about anything in my life. How much do you want? 3,000? She said. Then she watched my face and misread it completely because I had frowned, and she immediately said, 2,000 is fine. I frowned harder. She looked ready to offer to pay me. 6,000, I said. The system caps me at 30% above market. 6 was the ceiling. She sat there with her mouth slightly open, and I felt like a genius, and I had just hired the most terrifyingly competent human being I have ever employed. I found Pan Long at the same fair, which is the part I do not really joke about. He was running after recruiters who were already walking away. I watched him do it 3 times before I understood what I was watching. The fair was packing up. The booths were being folded. He was going down the row catching people who were carrying boxes, holding out a single sheet of paper. One of them took it, glanced at it, and pushed it back into his chest without breaking stride, and said they needed young people, and asked how old he was in the tone you use for furniture. 44, 20 years driving long haul. A back injury that finished it, the kind that does not stop you walking and does stop you sitting for 11 hours. He had 1 page, not a designed resume, a printed page, and I found out afterwards that his daughter had typed it for him at an internet cafe and that he had it printed 40 times because the man behind the counter told him that was the cheapest per unit. He had 31 of them left. 20 years driving trucks. A back injury that ended it. Nobody wanted him. I called him over to a bench and bought him a cold water and watched him hold it without drinking, exactly the way he had held that cigarette. I needed a driver. A driver means a car, and the system had already told me flatly that I could not buy myself a car, but a company vehicle for company use was a different conversation entirely. 8,000 a month, I said, full insurance and housing fund. He did not say thank you. He said, you are not joking with me? You are not one of those people? They ran my company through 3 separate search apps that night, his family and Xinhua's roommate both, independently, and both reached the same verdict, which was that this was almost certainly a fraud. Panlong's wife told him not to hand over a single yuan to anybody because everyone who asks you for money is a scammer. Xinhua's roommate He Min, who was a person of strong opinions, decided that 6,000 for an intern meant the boss wanted a mistress and said so, loudly, in a dormitory. They both showed up anyway. I furnished the office in between. Desks at 4,999 each, chairs at 2,399, 12 full sets, because I counted every position I might ever create and then added 1 for luck. 96,174. This is excessive, Sun Young said. The saleswoman offered me 5% off, which would have saved me over 4,000. No discount, I said. She thought I was insulting her. I had to explain that she had worked hard and should be allowed to earn it, and she gave me a look I would see on a lot of faces that year, and said to nobody that rich people are all strange. Xinhua's first day nearly ended before it started because she walked in, saw me, and realized that the sleeping man at the corner table had been the boss the entire time, and the mistress theory came roaring back. Then I walked her through the workshop, central air conditioning humming, 26 people who all straightened up and said hello to me at once, not in fear, in the other way. She watched a room full of workers be genuinely glad to see the owner of the company walk in. The theory died on the spot. Her advance came through that afternoon. 6,400. You have made a mistake, she said, standing in my doorway with her phone out. 400 is the perfect attendance bonus. I have not attended anything yet. We pay in advance. You can give it back later. I have never taken anything back in my life, and she has never once tested it. Then she told me she was going to work as hard as she possibly could, and I had a small internal emergency and told her that our company culture is relaxed, that overwork destroys your capacity for joy, that she should protect her sense of wonder. I gave her my own desk and my own computer. I moved to a worse one. She wrote all of it down in a notebook. She still has that notebook. I have seen it. It has my name on the cover and it is full of my sayings, and every single one of them was a man trying to make his company worse. Lunch was the next disaster of good intentions. I found out the workshop crew were buying food from the trucks outside with their own money, so I announced the company would cover lunch and set the ceiling at the most expensive set the trucks offered, 16 yuan plus a drink. It came to a few hundred a day, a few hundred. I remember sitting there genuinely upset about it, like a man who has been given a bucket and told to empty the sea. Pan Long signed his contract that week. He came by bus and then ran the last stretch and arrived soaked through and would not sit on the clean chair until Xinhua made him. She read his contract to him line by line, out loud, in a voice I would describe as protective. 8,400 hit his account before he had walked back out the gate. He pinched himself in the corridor. He thought nobody saw. Xinhua saw. She told me years later that it was the moment she decided to stay. The computers went in next. Sun Yang, my beloved saboteur, informed me that 7,000 a unit was more than adequate for office work and represented excellent value. Excellent value. This man was a walking toxin. 43,000 a unit, 12 units, over 500,000 gone in a morning. The shop mentioned there would be a sale in 2 weeks. I do not need a sale. Then we had to move the old furniture out, and I told the workshop to take the old desks and sell them for cigarette money, and I offered 200 yuan to anyone who helped carry. They refused the 200, all of them. They said it was their factory, and this was the least they could do. I want you to understand how that lands on a man in my position. It is not your job, I said. If it is not your job, you get paid. And a room full of people who had spent their entire working lives being told to carry the boss's furniture for free on a Sunday looked at me like I had said something enormous. Xinhua got 200 as well, for supervising, which consisted of standing in a doorway pointing at things. The next morning, I walked past Sun Yang and Guo Ming loading bulging sacks of old clothing into a van. Need a hand? No, Mr. Guo, they said. We have it. They exchanged a look behind my back that they described to me later as two men who had just been silently blessed. They went to the night market. They went every night for a week, and I have since had the whole operation described to me in detail, twice, by two men who were extremely proud of it. 10,000 pieces of returned and defective clothing, bad seams, wrong sizes, a batch where the dye had gone patchy across an entire run. The previous owner had written all of it off and stacked it in bags in the back of the warehouse where it had been quietly taking up space for 2 years. Guo Ming priced it at 5 yuan. Sun Yang said 6. They compromised at whatever the stallholder would pay. They did not sell it retail. That is the part I underestimated. They sold it in bulk at the wholesale end of the night market to the men who run the tarpaulin tables at a price that let those men triple it. That is why it moved. 7 nights. 2 of them, after work, in a van they borrowed from the industrial park, unloading garment sacks under sodium lights and coming back at midnight to sleep 4 hours and then run laps in the morning because I had made them pacers. Neither of them claimed a single yuan of overtime for it. And on the last night they sat in the van and counted 74,280 yuan. They looked at that number and had the same thought at the same time, which was that a number like that should be presented properly, so they did not transfer it that evening. They waited, and they wrote a 1-page summary with the total on it, and they transferred the money the following afternoon at 4:50, 10 minutes before my settlement, so that the report and the deposit would land together and look tidy. They wanted it to look tidy. 2 million yuan. I have never told either of them what those 10 minutes cost. I never will. Guo Ming still brings up the dead stock at company dinners as the first time he ever felt like a businessman. While that was happening, downstairs from me, Pan Long took his daughter shopping. Pan Lingling was 6, maybe 7, and she stopped in front of the meat counter and looked at it for a while, and then announced that her teacher said children should eat more vegetables. She was not repeating a lesson. She had done the math on her family's money in her head at 7 and had decided to make it easy on her father. He bought 3 jin of pork and 2 of beef. His wife shouted at him for a full minute when he got home, until he showed her the transfer on his phone. Then she stopped shouting and cried instead, standing in a kitchen holding 2 kilos of beef. Then she said the sentence that changed my diet forever. That boy upstairs eats nothing but delivery. I will make extra. We will take some up. That is how the knocking started. I had 600,000 out the door and 134,000 left in a 2 million fund with 11 days on the clock, and I was sitting on my floor when somebody knocked. I went to the peephole and there was nobody there. I am not proud of the next 4 seconds. Then I looked down, opened the door, and there was a small child leaning against the wall next to a plastic bag roughly her own size, breathing hard. My mother says you have to eat it hot. 6 dishes. Actual 6 dishes in a stairwell in a building with no elevator, carried up 7 floors by a child who is roughly the size of the bag. I want to break the pace here for a moment because this is the part of the story I actually think about. I had been eating delivery for 11 months, not because I could not cook. Because when you live alone in a rented room, the ritual of cooking for one person is a specific kind of sad, and the delivery apps have solved that by turning dinner into a transaction with nobody in it. Pan Lingling stood in my doorway with both arms straight down, holding a bag, breathing hard, and said the line she had clearly been given. My mother says you have to eat it hot. Then she waited, not for thanks. She waited to be told what to do next, the way children do when they have been sent on an errand and have not been briefed past the delivery. Do you want to come in? She thought about it very seriously and said she was not allowed, then came in anyway. She inspected my apartment with the frank contempt of a 7-year-old and told me that I do not have a television, which was true, and that this is very strange for a grown-up, which was also true. I ate braised pork, a green vegetable I could not identify, egg with tomato, a cold dish, a soup, and rice, sitting on the floor because I owned one chair and it wobbled, with a pair of chopsticks I had to wash first. It was extraordinary. And somewhere in the middle of it, I had a business idea, because that is what I am now, and the idea was a canteen with star hotel chefs in it, and it would cost a fortune, and I was delighted. But I want to be honest about the order of events, because the order matters. I had the business idea second. The first thing I thought, sitting on a floor in a rented flat with a plastic bag next to me and a small girl walking around switching my one lamp on and off, was that this was the first meal anybody had cooked for me in this life. And then I stopped thinking about that because it is not useful, and I started costing out commercial kitchen equipment instead. I sat down on the floor and ate braised pork with a pair of chopsticks I had to wash first, and it was so good that it caused an actual business decision. If one woman cooking in a rented flat could produce that, what could a proper kitchen do? A canteen, a real one, star hotel chefs, free food, every day, for everybody. It was going to cost me a fortune. I lay awake that night feeling like a genius, which by now you will recognize as the single most reliable warning sign in this entire story. That same night, on the other side of the city, my new assistant got a phone call from an old woman. Grandma Guo runs the orphanage where Xinhua grew up. She was calling to ask why so much money had appeared in the orphanage account and whether Xinhua had done something stupid. Xinhua had sent all of it, 6,400 yuan, the entire advance, the salary she had not earned yet, including the 400 I invented on the spot. Keep some for yourself, the old woman said. How will you ever find a boyfriend if you hand everything to us? Then I will not find one, Xinhua said, and hung up and stayed awake until past midnight searching the phrase what qualities should a good executive assistant have. Her roommate leaned over the bunk and told her that since she now had a real salary, she could quit the night job. She did not quit the night job, she just stopped mentioning it. I bought the car the next morning, and I would like to formally apologize to the saleswoman at that dealership. I walked the entire showroom floor, asking exactly one question at every vehicle, which was how much. Not the engine, not the trim, not the warranty, how much? 160,000. Too little. She started over, patiently, with the specifications. I let her finish and then asked how much again. By the 4th car she had given up entirely and was just reciting prices like a woman calling out lottery numbers. Give me the list for business sedans between 500 and 600,000. That was the ceiling. I had tested it. The system had been quite firm that a sports car was not a reasonable company vehicle, which I thought was petty. I pointed at a Mercedes at 590,000. We can do 580, she said brightly. I frowned. She stopped. She looked at my face. Something recalculated behind her eyes, and I watched a professional adapt in real time to the strangest customer of her career. There is also a model at 620, she said carefully, which after discount comes to exactly 600,000. Excellent. That one. Paid in full, on the spot. She told her colleague afterward that I was simultaneously the most boring and the easiest sale of her life, on the drive back. I found out that Gao Ma, Panlong's wife, had learned to cook from her father, who had been a chef. 7,500 a month, I said from the back seat to the woman who had been sending me dinner in a plastic bag. Head chef, the company is building a canteen. Pan Long nearly put us into a guardrail. Between his 8,000 and her 7.5, a household that had been counting coins at a meat counter went to 15,500 a month plus bonuses in about 9 days. And in my head, the canteen was already expanding. 3-star hotel chefs at 15,000 each, kitchen staff, cleaners, rent on a whole industrial unit, renovation, commercial kitchen equipment. Beautiful, enormous, a money pit with a roof. So naturally I sent Sun Yang to go find the unit because sending Sun Yang away from clients had become a reflex. He came back with a lease. He also came back with something else. He had been sitting in the industrial park manager's office, and the manager, a bald, cheerful operator named Guo Jiang, had a sketch on his desk of a workwear uniform. And Sun Yang, being Sun Yang, had leaned over and said, "We make those." I did not know this yet. I was happily walking through the 2 floors Guo Jiang offered me, 600 square meters each, the most expensive space on his list at 200,000 a year. We will take it. 2 years. 2 years is the system's maximum. Guo Jiang had come in with a discount speech memorized and had to swallow it whole. He told me later that in 11 years nobody had ever taken his highest quote without a single round of haggling, and that he went home that night and told his wife about it. 400,000 out the door. I felt magnificent. Then he arrived at my office to sign, and he looked around at my 4,900 yuan desks and my humming workshop, and he said the worst sentence I had heard all month. So with the 70,000 deducted, that is 330. Deducted for what? The uniforms. 1,000 sets at 70 each. Your Mr. Joe quoted me yesterday. Sun Yang. Again. Sun Yang. I sat there smiling like a man having a stroke and did the arithmetic. 70,000 yuan of income, generated by a man I had specifically hidden in a room with a paint roller because I made the mistake of sending him to look at real estate. I asked the system, quietly, in my own head, whether I could fire him. The system informed me that terminating an employee requires legitimate cause and that excellent performance is not legitimate cause. Fine, not fired, transferred. Somewhere he cannot reach a customer. I put a pin in it. Gao Ma came in to sign her contract that afternoon, and 7,900 landed in her account before she had finished reading it. She bowed to me. An adult woman bowed to me in an office and said I was her family's benefactor, then refused to accept money for a month in which the canteen did not exist yet. I had to invent a job on the spot to make her take it. I asked her to compile a book of menus. She took that assignment more seriously than most people take marriage. The canteen renovation is where I met Lin Bo, and Lin Bo is the reason I got rich in a way the system never saw coming, although neither of us knew that for another year. Nobody at the design company wanted the job. A staff canteen is low margin and high fuss. The supervisor, a man named Ren Gang, dumped it on the newest intern in the room as a kind of joke and told him that if he closed it, he could stay on staff. So a nervous kid turned up with a notepad, and I proceeded to describe the most expensive canteen in the province. Non-toxic paint, price irrelevant, top brand tile, 2 large screens in the dining area, central air conditioning on both floors, wooden cladding on the whole staircase. Cladding on the stairs, he said, so that nobody breaks anything if they fall. And then the second floor. A rest area, 2 billiard tables, a ping pong table, an arcade cabinet, massage chairs. He stopped writing at the massage chairs. Back at his office, the other designers told him he had misheard because their own department did not have air conditioning. He wrote the quote anyway. 450,000. They told him he had lost his mind and that no client on earth would pick it. Xinhua, meanwhile, had put the job on a tender platform and 10 companies came. 10 quotes landed on my desk. Excellent, I said. We will take the most expensive one. She thought she had misheard. She actually said, sorry? Every other quote was around 200,000, achieved by using cheaper paint, cheaper tile, and a 20,000 yuan air conditioner for 1,200 square meters. Every one of them went in the bin. Only one quote had actually built what I asked for, 450,000. I want to describe what happened in that design office when the tender result came back, because I only learned about it later, and it is the reason Lin Bo would eventually hand me a red envelope that changed my life. He had been an intern for 6 weeks. The canteen job had been dumped on him as a joke, because staff canteens are low margin and high fuss and nobody wanted it. His supervisor Ren Gang had told him that if he closed it, he could stay on staff, which is the sort of thing supervisors say when they expect nothing. He wrote the quote honestly. Non-toxic paint at the price non-toxic paint actually costs. Top brand tile, central air conditioning sized for 1,200 square meters, not a domestic unit bolted to a wall, wooden cladding on the full staircase, 2 large screens. And upstairs, because I had asked for it, 2 billiard tables, a table tennis table, an arcade cabinet, and 4 massage chairs. His colleagues read it over his shoulder and told him he had misheard the brief. One of them pointed out, not unkindly, that their own department did not have air conditioning and asked why a factory canteen would. Guo Guang, who was his mentor and who genuinely liked him, sat him down and explained how this works. You quote what the client wants to hear. You come in at 200,000. You use the cheaper paint and a 20,000 yuan air conditioner and you make it look correct in the drawings. Then you win, and afterwards there are variations and everyone understands. He asked for specific things, Lin Bo said. They always do. He submitted it anyway, then he went home and did not sleep because he was 23 and had just staked a permanent job on a quote that was 2.25 times everyone else's. 10 firms tendered. 9 came in around 200,000 and every one of the 9 had specified the cheap paint and the small air conditioner, and I put all 9 in the bin without reading past the specifications. Xinhua came in to confirm she had understood me correctly. You want the most expensive one. I want the only one that quoted what I asked for. It happens to be the most expensive one. Those are different sentences, and I would like you to notice which one I said. She wrote it down, and that particular note has caused me more trouble than any other single line in that notebook because she has applied it ever since to every procurement decision she has ever made, and it is a genuinely excellent policy. He was made permanent the same week. Rengang stood him up in front of the whole department as an example of what happens when you actually listen to a client, which was a lesson none of them had been taught, and which several of them had actively been taught out of, and I paid the 450,000 in full on signature before a single tile was laid. Mr. Guo, you should not do that, he said. Nobody pays it all up front. If we take the money and do a bad job, you have no leverage. Why would you do a bad job? He could not answer. That, and I have noticed that a very large amount of standard business practice collapses the moment somebody asks that question sincerely. I paid the full amount immediately. Mr. Guo, you should not pay it all up front, he said. Nobody does that. Why not? He did not have an answer, and I have noticed that a lot of business practice is like that. I gave Xinhua a raise the same day, 6,000 to 8,000, and the system let me move her exactly 2,000 and not 1 yuan further, and I called it a dog under my breath, and it did not care. By then, everything was bought, the fund was down to 3 yuan and 41 fen out of 2 million, and I had a full day left, a whole day, nothing could touch me. So I installed a game on my 43,000 yuan computer. The game was called Tianlong, and I want the record to show that I went in with a pure heart. I was level nothing in a starter zone when a player one-shot me from off-screen. Then he did it again while I was still reading the death message. His name was, I am a local tyrant, and he typed in the local channel that I should call him daddy or he would kill me every time I stood up. I reported him. The system message came back in under a minute. The reported user holds premium status. Your report has been dismissed. Respawn timer 30 minutes or 1 diamond. I opened the store. Ordinary top up 100 yuan, the highest tier. I want you to sit with this. Was 100,000. I looked at my personal assets. 2,023 yuan. The total accumulated wealth of a man who had personally spent 3 million yuan that fortnight. I paid 1 yuan. I respawned. He killed me before the loading screen finished. I uninstalled it and left a 1-star review. Then I read the other reviews, and 90% of them were furious, and I felt an enormous and unhealthy comfort. Remember that game. It is going to come back for me. I filled the workshop with snack cabinets the next morning. Free drinks, free snacks, restocked twice a week. I watched a woman on the 3rd row take a bottle of iced tea and go back to her machine, and I watched her work with a kind of lightness, and I found out later she had been listing it in her head. Salary in advance, air conditioning, a raise, insurance, lunch, a canteen coming, now this. Then Sun Yong knocked. Mr. Guo, good news. I have developed a physical reaction to that phrase. My shoulders go up. The client tested the last batch. They liked the quality so much they placed a follow-up order. 70,000. The payment already cleared. 3 yuan and 41 fen became 70,000 and 3 yuan and 41 fen. Sun Yong, I said, and I could hear my own voice from far away. You are a complete traitor. He laughed. He thought it was a joke. He told Guo Ming that the boss had a very dry sense of humor. I had 1 day to destroy 70,000 yuan, 26 staff, 26 supermarket gift cards at 500 each, 13,000, a hot weather allowance, 500 a head, another 13, and then a staff dinner at Xingyu restaurant for 27 people, and when they asked what standard I wanted, I said the standard is 44,000 yuan. The fund went back to a few hundred with hours to spare. I have never been prouder of anything. Xinhua did not come to the dinner. She said she had a prior commitment. The commitment was her night job, which she was still working, so she could keep sending money to the orphanage that she had already sent all of her salary to. I did not know that at the time. If I had, that dinner would have cost me considerably more. The dinner was where I learned what a bottle of beer costs, which is not much, which was a lesson I took entirely the wrong way. The staff stood outside the restaurant reading the reviews on their phones. Average spend 500 to 800 per person. Our chef, Lin Xiaoming, a genuine star hotel man who had somehow ended up cooking in a factory canteen, worked it out to at least 1,000 a head and correctly predicted Australian lobster. Guo Ming ran the toasts. Guo Ming was born to run toasts. He stood on a chair and shouted, "Who are we?" And 26 people shouted back, "Brothers," and I sat there thinking that beer is far too cheap and that next time we are drinking red wine. Then the toasts came to me, and I discovered that my personal alcohol capacity is slightly under 1 bottle of beer. Pan Long carried me home. His wife took him apart for it. You are his driver, she said. You are supposed to know his limit. Then she made hangover soup at 11 at night, and while she stirred it, she thought out loud that they had a daughter in her first year of university who was not so very much younger. The soup arrived the next morning with steamed buns, delivered by a 7-year-old. And the day after that, the second bomb went off. The fund was at 3 yuan and 85 fen, 3 hours on the clock. Untouchable. I was playing a game I had already uninstalled on a new account, humming a song from my old life that does not exist in this world, and Xinhua stuck her head in and asked what it was, because she wanted to teach it to the children at the orphanage. Downstairs, Sun Yang and Guo Ming were counting. 10,000 pieces of dead stock, 5 to 10 yuan apiece. 7 nights at the night market. 74,280 yuan. They transferred it to the company account 10 minutes before settlement because they wanted the number to look good on the report. 2 million yuan, gone. Personal assets after settlement, 3,872. And then Sun Yang came upstairs, with Guo Ming behind him, both of them glowing, and said the following words to my face. Mr. Guo, I finally understood what you were hinting at, and honestly, half the credit belongs to Guo Ming. I looked at Guo Ming. Guo Ming looked back at me with the shy pride of a man expecting a promotion. Guo Ming, I said, so it was you too. New fund, 4 million. New period, 1 month. The system had started giving me longer runways the way you give a struggling child extra time on a test, and I resented it deeply. I went back to the hiring problem with a new and colder philosophy. I sorted resumes backwards. 10 years of sales experience, Binny. Regional record holder, Bin. Fresh graduate, no experience, has never sold anything. Name of Guo Fan, hired instantly. Xinhua brought the folder back to me twice because she thought I had accidentally handed her the rejection pile. New company, new spirit, I told her. The inexperienced are easier to shape. She wrote that down too. Then the system spoke up, which it does maybe twice a month, and never with good news. Staffing has reached 70%, side quest issued. Acquire a second company in an unrelated industry. Reward, a work of art from a parallel world, a second company in another industry. I did not even have to think about it. I already knew exactly which company I wanted, and it had nothing to do with garments, and everything to do with the man who had told me to call him daddy. The company was called Kangshui Games. They made Tianlong, and they were dying. I found them on a business listing site the way you find a used refrigerator. 2 managers, Gao Yong and He Guodong, had killed their own game with their own hands. They had introduced pay-to-win weapons, the balance broke, the players left, the follow-up title never earned back its budget, and now they were 4 weeks from bankruptcy. 1.5 million yuan, and they were mine. I called Lin Xin. She was in the middle of the worst week of her professional life at the time, which I did not know. Her senior partner was pushing her to run a case against an injured worker, a man who had fallen because the company never issued him a harness, and she was trying to find a way to lose it on purpose without technically losing it on purpose. She ran the checks on Kangshui anyway because she is a professional. They are insolvent, she reported. The valuation is generous. Mr. Guo, you appear to have a hobby. Then she suggested I could probably get it under 1.5 million if I pushed. No, I am in a hurry. 1.5 is fine. Xinhua, from the side, said that for 1.5 million, I could just start my own studio from scratch. Where is the fun in that? I said. Is it not better to take a failing company and turn it around? What I actually meant was that a failing company is a beautiful, self-refilling hole in the bottom of my boat, and this one came pre-drilled. She looked at me like I had said something noble. She wrote it down. Gao Yong had scrubbed the office before I got there. Actual mopping. There were vacuum tracks on a carpet that had not seen a vacuum in a year, and somebody had put a plant in reception that was still in its plastic nursery pot, with the price sticker facing the wall. 34 people were at their desks pretending to work at 9 in the morning on a day when there was nothing to do, because he had told them to look busy. He met me at the lift and shook my hand for slightly too long, and I noticed that his shirt cuffs were frayed and that he had turned them under. He walked me through the studio and named the projects, and every single one of them was in the past tense. Then we got to his office, and he closed the door and asked the question he had been holding since the lift. Mr. Guo, may I ask why you did not negotiate? Because I am in a hurry. Nobody is in that much of a hurry. He sat down. In my experience, a buyer who does not push on price has already decided how he is going to make the money back, and the fastest way to make 1.5 million yuan back out of a company like this is headcount. He had a list on his desk. I saw it later. He had prepared a document arguing for every single one of his 34 employees, with their circumstances written next to their names. Mortgage, new baby, sick parent, 11 years of service. He had come into that meeting expecting to beg. I said 1.5 million, I said. So it is 1.5 million. My word is worth more than the discount, and I am keeping all of them. All of them. Hiring is a nuisance. He looked at me for a moment and then stood up and bowed. From the waist. A man in his 50s, in a frayed shirt, in his own office, on behalf of 34 people, he had failed. I let him do it, because stopping him would have taken it away from him. And the honest accounting, the one I could not say out loud, is that I had already run their payroll against their revenue on the drive over, and that company was bleeding beautifully, and the very last thing you do to something that is bleeding correctly is fix it. He was terrified, and specifically, he was terrified because I had not haggled, and in his experience, a buyer who does not haggle is a buyer who intends to make the money back by cutting staff. 34 people, he said. I know it is not my place, but some of them have families. I said 1.5 million, so it is 1.5 million. And I am keeping everyone. He asked if I was sure. Hiring is a nuisance, I said, which was true, and also I had just looked at their payroll against their revenue and seen a company that was already bleeding beautifully, and the last thing you do to a bleeding thing is fix it. He bowed to me, from the waist, on behalf of 34 people. Then I asked for a long table and a calculator, and Lin Xin said, out loud, I am experiencing this twice. Same routine. Gao Yang paid them what he owed. I paid them next month in advance with a 30% raise on top. 34 people got paid twice in 9 minutes. And that is where I met Ma Kai. Ma Kai was their game planner. And when I asked around about him, one detail came back that decided everything. He had been the only person in the building who argued against the pay-to-win system. He had lost that argument publicly, then watched the game die exactly the way he said it would. Now, read that the way I read it. I heard, this man opposed the thing that made money. This man is a natural-born architect of losses. This man has a proven track record of steering a product straight into the ground while everyone applauds. I made him general manager on the spot. 8,000 a month to 15,000 transferred immediately. I believe in you, I said, gripping his hand. Work harder, I thought. Sink it. He got emotional. He said that a scholar will die for the one who understands him. He meant it. I want to state, for the record and for my own dignity, that I have replayed that handshake perhaps 400 times. Ma Kai was not an architect of losses. Ma Kai had been right. Ma Kai was the single most dangerous man in my entire company, and I promoted him for it inside 40 minutes of meeting him. Meanwhile, my assistant had begun studying. He Min had recommended her a drama in which an assistant marries her boss, and Xinhua had watched it and had taken from it the entirely wrong lesson, which is that there are techniques. So the water glass started being refilled before it was empty. The air conditioning started getting adjusted before I noticed I was warm. My documents started appearing in the order I would want them in. Is this not a bit thorough? I said. I read a book about the hidden methods of an executive assistant, she said seriously. I raised her to 10,000. It was the only lever I had. Then I built the dormitory, and the dormitory is a good example of how my brain worked that summer. 2 people to a room, no bunk beds because bunk beds are cheap, private bathroom in every room, and here is the part I am proud of, individual air conditioning units in every single room rather than one central system. Central would be cheaper, Linbo said. People have different temperature preferences. That is what I said. What I meant was that 30 separate units cost enormously more than one big one, and I would like it noted that this is the single greatest lie I have ever told, because every worker in that building now believes their boss thinks deeply about their comfort. Everything top brand, every fitting. Linbo did not sleep for a night and came back with a quote for 930,000 yuan, and his mentor Guo Guang went white, because that is an absurd number for a staff dormitory, and every single line of it was honest. That is tens of thousands more than I expected, I said. Excellent. Paid in full. Linbo, an intern 3 months earlier, had booked 1.3 million yuan in a single quarter and become the top salesman in his department without ever once finding a client. Xinhua got a 2,000 yuan bonus that week. I did not do anything, she said. Did you make any mistakes? No. Then you earned it. Ma Kai came to me with his old projects, 3 of them, all rejected by the previous owners. Did you write these yourself? Yes. Then they are excellent. Pick whichever you like. He picked a shooter. He said he needed 300,000. Take 500,000. That is when he said the scholar line for the second time. And then I introduced the morning run, which was the first genuinely petty thing I ever did as an employer, and I regret nothing. Half an hour every morning, 10 laps, everybody, 3 days a week. Except the Pacers. The Pacers run every single day, and I selected the Pacers personally with enormous care from a list of exactly 3 men. Guo Ming, Sun Yang, Lin Xiaoming, the man who found the dead stock, the man who found the orders, and the man who poured the drinks. Lin Xiaoming, who is built like a comfortable sofa, died on the 3rd lap and told me he could not run. Then walk, I said warmly. 10 laps. Sun Yang said he had a client meeting. Health is more important than business. Xinhua ran the whole thing beside the workshop girls without complaining once, which annoyed me for reasons I could not articulate. The first morning was the best morning of my life. 6:50, fog on the yard. 120 people in a loose column, most of them still holding breakfast, and me on the steps with a whistle I had bought specifically for this. Lin Xiaoming arrived last, in a tracksuit that had been purchased with optimism, and asked whether pacers were a permanent appointment or a rotating one. Permanent. He looked at the yard. It is 400 meters around. 10 laps. 10. He made it to 3. He stopped at the corner with his hands on his knees and produced a sound like a door. "Mr. Guo," he said when I strolled over. "I genuinely cannot run." "Then walk," I said, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I made my voice extremely warm. "But it is still 10 laps. Your health matters to me." He walked 7 laps. It took him 50 minutes. He was late for his own kitchen. Sun Yang tried the other approach, which was procedural. "Mr. Guo, I have a client at 9. If I run first, I will need to shower and change, and the traffic at that hour. Health is more important than business." "Yes, but the client." "Sun Yang." I looked at him with what I sincerely hoped was affection. "You have made this company a great deal of money. I am not going to let you damage yourself for it." 10 laps. He ran 10 laps, went to the client anyway with wet hair, and closed the order. Guoming ran his laps at genuine speed and then did an extra one because he felt good. My reasoning, which I had checked twice and considered flawless, was this. Tired workers are slow workers. Slow workers produce fewer garments. Fewer garments means less revenue. What actually happened was that after 3 weeks the workshop stopped needing the afternoon tea break, the number of small injuries on the cutting floor fell by roughly half, and 2 of the older women told Gao Ma that their knees had stopped hurting on the stairs. Then I announced a company sports day with real prizes, and the entire column started training in the evenings, voluntarily, unpaid, in their own time. I stood at the window of my office watching 60 people run laps at 9 o'clock at night under the workshop floodlights, holding a whistle I no longer needed, and I understood that I had built a machine that converts everything I do, without exception, into productivity. My logic was airtight. Tire them out, productivity drops, fewer garments, less money, flawless. Then I announced a company sports day with prizes, phones, and computers, and every single person on that field suddenly started running properly, and productivity went up, and I stood there with a whistle in my hand like a man who had just invented his own punishment. Tianlong was still ongoing, by the way. My private war, and I would like to walk you through it properly, because it is the single stupidest campaign in the history of commerce, and I ran it personally. Understand the situation first. I owned the game. I owned the servers, the database, the balance sheet, and the man who wrote the code. And I was being bullied inside it by a stranger who had done nothing to me except be richer in a virtual field over a virtual sword. A reasonable man would have let it go. I asked Ma Kai for an administrator account. "For testing purposes," I said. "Of course, Mr. Guo." He set it up in about 4 minutes and equipped it with the highest tier gear in the database. Then he asked, quite reasonably, what specifically I intended to test. Player experience. I went into the wild lands wearing equipment that does not exist in the store, and I found Chen Jing, who was farming quietly and minding his own business, and I removed him from the world in one swing. Then I typed in the local channel. "Tell your Tu Hao Gay to stay out of the wild lands. There is a specific pleasure in that, and I am not proud of it, and I would do it again." The reply arrived 11 minutes later in the form of 40 people, because the tyrant, whose name I still did not know, also had top-tier accounts, several of them. He had bought a set for himself and sets for his lieutenants, and money in that game is a stat like any other, and 40 players wearing bot statistics ran me down in an open field and stood on me. I respawned. They were waiting. They stood on me again. I sat in a 900 yuan office chair at 11 at night getting beaten to death repeatedly by strangers in a product I owned. I want you to understand that at no point did it occur to me to simply turn the servers off. Instead, I went to Ma Kai the next morning and ordered a new equipment set with higher numbers. "That is a week of modeling," he said. Then a week. I sent one message to the Tyrant's Guild before I logged off. 7 days. Ma Kai, walking back to his desk, told Sun Pengfei that the boss was personally stress-testing the endgame content, which was the most hands-on leadership he had ever seen, and Sun Pengfei agreed, and both of them worked late on it voluntarily. That is how every single thing in my life works now. I do something petty, somebody nearby converts it into virtue, the company gets stronger, I get poorer. Ma Kai came to me first with a proposal to shut it down, since it was losing money, and I nearly knocked over my chair. "What about the players who paid?" I said. "The company's reputation matters more than short-term losses." He wrote that down too. Everyone in my life writes things down. Then I asked for an administrator account with top-tier gear on it, purely for testing purposes, and I went into the wild zone and I found a man from the Tyrants Guild named Chen Jing, and I removed him from the world. Tell your Tu Hao Gay, I typed, to stay out of the wildlands. The reply came in the form of 40 people. Because the tyrant, whose real name I would learn much later and in an extremely inconvenient context, also had top-tier accounts, several of them, and money is a stat. They trampled me flat. I respawned, they trampled me again. So I went back to Makai and ordered a brand new equipment set with higher numbers. That is a week of modeling work, he said. Fine, a week. I sent the tyrant a message. 7 days. I was, and I want to be honest here, having the time of my life. Which is precisely when Guo Fan, my carefully selected, inexperienced graduate, walked in with an order for 100,000 yuan, and I let out a breath because 100,000 is survivable. Then Sun Yang came in behind him, scratching the back of his head, looking almost embarrassed, which is a look I have learned to fear more than shouting. Mr. Guo, sorry. I did not want to interrupt while Guo Fan was reporting because it is his first order and he should have the room. That is the kind of man he is. That sentence is why I could never hate him. Go ahead. I also accidentally picked something up, he said. About 1,600,000 of it arrives tomorrow. I sat very still. And honestly, Mr. Guo, all the credit goes to you. You are the one who chose the good fabric. That is why the clients keep coming back. So it is my fault. Exactly, he said, delighted that I understood. I had dug this hole myself with my own hands on day 1 with 200,000 yuan of good cloth. I want to walk through the sequence one more time, slowly, because it is the purest thing in this entire story. Day 1, I gave a salesman 200,000 yuan and told him to buy the best fabric available and not to bring me back a single fen, purely because I needed the money gone before Friday. He bought good cloth. The workshop made samples. Out of it, the samples were better than anything that factory had produced in 2 years, because for 2 years it had been working with material chosen by a man who was trying to sell the place. A client touched one of those samples and placed a 40,000 yuan order, and that order cost me 1 million yuan. Then the same client, having received goods that matched the sample, placed a 70,000 yuan follow-up, which cost me 2 million. Then he told 3 other people, and one of those people placed an order for 1 million yuan. Every single yuan of that traces back in an unbroken line to a purchasing decision I made in a panic on my first afternoon as a business owner. And when I finally worked that out and said it out loud in my own office, Sun Yang, standing in front of my desk, agreed with me enthusiastically. Exactly, Mr. Guo. That is exactly it. You set the standard, and the standard is doing the selling. I have been telling the new intake this all week. He has been telling the new intake. There is a version of this story where I am the victim of a conspiracy. There is no such conspiracy. There is only a man in an ironed shirt who thinks I am a genius, telling other people that I am a genius, and being extremely convincing about it because he genuinely believes it, because from where he is standing, it is completely true. Sun Yang had to go, not fired. The system had made that clear, transferred. So I made him office director of Kangshui Games, second in command of an entire company he knew nothing about, with another raise. The conversation went badly, by which I mean it went extremely well, and I hated it. Mr. Guo. He had come to my office within the hour, still holding the notice. I have to refuse this. You cannot refuse it. I have no education. I did not finish secondary school properly. I do not understand games. I have never played one. I do not know what any of those words in the document mean. There are people in that building with master's degrees who have been making games for 11 years. What am I supposed to say to them? Nothing. Listen to them. That is not a job. It is exactly the job. He stood there holding the notice, and I watched a genuinely intelligent man refuse a promotion on the grounds of competence, which is a thing I have seen perhaps 4 times in my life, and 3 of them were in this company. Mr. Guo, may I ask you something directly? Go ahead. Why me? And I had my answer ready, because I had prepared it, and it was so good that it has caused 14 months of continuous damage. Because there is nobody else I trust with it. His eyes went, and I mean that literally. He turned his head to the window for a moment. I meant that there is nobody else I trust to sink it. He heard the other thing. Everybody always hears the other thing. He took the job. He told his wife that night that the boss had handed him an entire company. And then he did the thing that ruined me, which was not arrogance and was not incompetence. On his first morning, he did not take the director's office. He asked which desk had the best view of the junior team, and he sat down at an empty workstation in the open plan area, and he opened a notebook, and he asked a 24-year-old programmer to explain what a build was. He was 31 years old, and he started again from nothing in a field he had never touched, in public, in front of people who had every reason to laugh at him. He did it for 11 months without once complaining, and by the end of it, he could read a design document and argue with it. I had aimed a demolition charge at my own games company, and it turned into a scholarship. Mr. Guo, I have no education. I do not understand games. I do not understand any of this. Perfect, I said. Then out loud, because he was looking at me, you will learn. There is nobody else I trust with it. He teared up in my office. He told people for weeks that the boss had entrusted him with a whole company. And I sat back and admired my own work, because now Kangshu Games had Ma Kai, my proven architect of failure, and Sun Yang, who could not read a design document. Sleeping Dragon and Fledgling Phoenix, I thought. A matched pair. That company is going to the bottom. What actually happened is that Sun Yang sat down at a junior employee's desk on his first morning with a notebook and began learning game development from the ground up like a man of 30 starting again. But that is later. The next thing that happened was overtime, and overtime is where I lost my temper for the first and only time that year. Guo Ming had quietly instituted overtime to hit the million-yuan order. When I found out, I called him in and delivered a speech about the sanctity of a worker's personal time that I would honestly stand behind today, except that internally it was screaming, overtime means more output means more money means more of my life spent trying to set fire to it. So I made a rule that I still think is my finest work. The workshop sets its own daily quota. Sales may not accept orders beyond that quota. One move, choked production and choked sales at the same time. I felt like a chess player. Then to sell it, I sweetened everything else. Overtime paid it double. Working day shortened from 7 to 6 down to 8 to 5. 2 full weekend days off. Every public holiday paid. The attendance bonus no longer forfeited for anything. And, effective immediately, today is a paid day off. Go home. The lobby went absolutely silent. I had expected noise. What I got was 120 people standing completely still while somebody at the back said, quite clearly, ask him again. So Guo Ming asked me again, Mr. Guo, to confirm, Saturday and Sunday both, every week paid. Yes. And the public holidays, paid. Yes. And the attendance bonus is not forfeited if we take them. That is the point of a holiday. And today is a paid day off. Go home. Then it detonated. A man asked his neighbor to pinch him. Somebody actually did. That day rippled outward in ways I did not see for months. A worker named Chen Hao, who had not been home in 3 months because he was afraid of losing his attendance bonus, went home. On the bus, he worked out that he could bring his wife in as a canteen cleaner, and they could live together in the new dormitory. His old colleague, Chao Donghai, flatly refused to believe that a factory in this province paid people to stay home, and announced he was going to come and see it with his own eyes. And in a university dormitory, Hemin shook Xinhua awake, shouting that she was going to be late. It is my day off. Are you ill? Xinhua slept until 9 in the morning for the first time in years. She had been working 3 jobs and sleeping 2 hours a night to keep an orphanage running, and nobody in my company, including me, had any idea. I spent my own day off badly. My apartment had no air conditioning, no coffee machine, and no internet. And by 11 in the morning, I had concluded that giving everyone a holiday had been a strategic error. Xinhua rescued me by inviting me to lunch, which she insisted on paying for out of a salary she was giving away. Hot pot. Hemin came. Hemin dragged Xinhua into a shop on the way and made her look at a dress reduced to 465 yuan. Xinhua stood there holding it and did the arithmetic out loud, which was that 500 yuan feeds the children for a while, and put it back. Then Hemin ordered fruit beer and told me with total confidence that fruit beer is not alcohol, it is a beverage. 2 bottles. I remember the second one being handed to me, and I remember nothing after that. Pan Long carried me up 7 flights. Again. Gao Ma made hangover soup. Again. And in her kitchen the two of them had a whispered argument in which she accused him of leaving Xinhua to nurse me because she had been planning to introduce me to their daughter. Let young people sort themselves out, Pan Long said. Oh, like you did? It emerged at that point that in his youth he had quietly beaten up 2 of her other suitors. That is exactly why I picked you, she said. You seemed like a man. Xinhua sat by my bed all night. Hemin wandered around my apartment looking at the cracked tiles and the wobbling chair and said, to nobody, that this man is rich and lives exactly like you do, giving it all away and spending nothing on himself. In the morning, Pan Lingling brought breakfast for 2 without being told and did not comment on the second bowl. Then, Xinhua took me to the orphanage, and I stopped finding any of this funny for about an hour. Red Heart Orphanage. A peeling sign. A dirt yard, not paved, packed hard and gray. A swing set with rust coming through the paint in 2 long streaks like something bleeding. A 3-story building shedding its render in patches the shape of provinces. I stood at the gate longer than I meant to. The children came off that swing set like water going over a weir and hit Xinhua at speed, all of them at once, all of them shouting Sister Ming, and one very small one attached itself to her leg and simply stayed there for the rest of the visit, walking when she walked. Grandma Guo came out and scolded her for 4 straight minutes for bringing snacks. Grandma Guo scolds her for everything. It is how the two of them talk. She sends the money, the old woman told me, as though Xinhua were not standing there. All of it, every month. Then she comes and buys biscuits with what is left, which is nothing, and I tell her not to, and she does it anyway. Grandma, you are 22 years old. Buy a dress. Then she took me upstairs to see the dormitory, because Grandma Guo is not stupid, and she had already worked out what I was there for. Wooden bed frames, the old kind, and the legs had gone on a lot of them. They had been propped up with stacked bricks, not one bed. I counted 14. I looked at 14 beds standing on bricks, and I asked the system, in my own head, standing in that room, whether charity counts as company expenditure. It counts. 10% of the fund. But the money has to be moved to a designated charitable account 7 days before a settlement cycle begins, which meant I could not move a single yuan that day, and that is the only time in 14 months I have wanted to argue with the thing out of anger rather than greed. A girl of about 9 came and stood in front of me while I was doing sums. Are you Sister Ming's boss? Yes. Can you be my boss when I grow up? Why? She thought about it very carefully, the way children do when they know the answer already and are checking it. Because then I would have money, she said, and I could buy presents for the little ones. Her name is Gao Yuer. We hooked fingers on it, which in this country is binding, and the terms are that after university she comes and works for me. I intend to honor that. I have written it down in the same notebook as everything else, on its own page, and it is the only entry in there that is not about money. I did not tell Xinhua, and I have not told anybody since, that in another life, in a different country that does not exist here, I grew up in a building with a dirt yard and a broken swing as well. I just stood in that room and did arithmetic, because arithmetic is the only thing I have ever been any good at when it matters. The children came off that swing set like a wave and hit Xinhua at speed. Sister Ming, all of them at once. Grandma Guo scolded her for bringing snacks. Grandma Guo scolds her for everything. Then I looked in the dormitory. Wooden bed frames with the legs broken off, propped up on stacked bricks. Not one bed. Most of them. I asked the system quietly whether charity counts. It does. 10% of the fund. But the money must be moved into a designated charitable account 7 days before a cycle begins, which meant I could not do it today, and that was the first time I ever wanted to argue with the thing. A small girl named Gao Yuer tugged my sleeve and asked if I would be her boss when she grew up. Why? Because then I can buy presents for the little ones. We hooked fingers on it. After university, she comes and works for me. That is a binding contract in this world, and I intend to honor it. I did not tell Xinhua or anybody else that in another life, a long time ago and a world away, I grew up in a place with a dirt yard and a broken swing too. I just stood in that room and did arithmetic. While I was standing in that dormitory, Lin Xin was being destroyed. Her senior partner, a man named Guo Jianjun, called her into his office and accused her of losing the harness case on purpose. He was not wrong. The client had paid up front, the worker had fallen because nobody had issued him safety equipment, and the company had installed the safety lines the day after the accident and then photographed them. 100,000 yuan was the offer. Take it and be grateful. You took the money, Guo Jianjun said. You solved the problem. I am not going to earn against my conscience. Then leave the firm, and you will be compensating us for the loss. We have the office footage. She walked out of that building understanding, about 4 steps too late, that the entire case had been handed to her precisely so that this could happen. 2 days later, a headline appeared. Elite lawyer loses case, resigns in disgrace. The comments sections filled up in the usual way. Somebody wrote that she is a woman, so what kind of elite lawyer could she be, and it got 4,000 likes. Guo Jianjun did not release the footage. He kept it on a drive. He told a colleague that when you are not certain a shot will kill, you keep the gun pointed. I read all of this over breakfast and had one thought and one thought only. Legal department. I asked the system what a legal department requires. It said, at minimum, 1 elite lawyer on staff, an elite lawyer who had just publicly lost, maximum salary, minimum output, and unemployable everywhere else on earth. Perfect configuration. I offered her an annual salary of 1 million yuan. The system permits annual contracts only for special positions, and a chief legal officer qualifies, and an annual contract means I could pay the entire year in one transfer on the first morning. She came in and sat down and set one condition before she would even look at the number. I should describe the state she was in because it matters. Lin Xin had been a senior associate at a firm with a marble reception desk, and she arrived at my office in a taxi, not the Mercedes, and I found out later she had sold it. Not because she needed to, because it was leased through the firm and she had returned it rather than argue about it. The headline had run 11 days earlier. Elite lawyer loses case, resigns in disgrace. The comment threads had done what comment threads do. Somebody had written that she is a woman, so what kind of elite lawyer could she have been? And it had 4,000 likes, and every recruiter in the city had seen it. She had applied to 9 firms. 2 had replied. "I will not break the law," she said, "and I will not break my own conscience. If a case comes across my desk and I believe the client is in the wrong in a way I cannot live with, I will refuse it, and I will not negotiate about that. If that is a problem, tell me now, and I will leave and we will both have had a pleasant morning. That is the easiest condition anybody has ever given me. You have not heard the second one. There is a second one. I will not be a decoration," she said. "I know what a distressed hire looks like. If you want a name on a letterhead to reassure investors, say so now. Because I would rather work at a small firm doing conveyancing than sit in a nice office being nothing." I looked at her for a while. Because that is precisely, exactly, to the letter, what I wanted. A name. An expensive name, on a payroll, generating nothing. "You will have real work," I said. That is the only outright lie I told anybody that year, and it turned out not to be a lie at all, because she manufactured the work herself out of nothing within 4 days, and has not stopped since. Then she read the number. 1 million yuan. Annual contract. The system permits annual terms only for specified senior posts, and a chief legal officer qualifies, which meant I could transfer the entire year on the first morning. She read it 3 times. Then she asked carefully whether the decimal point was where I intended it to be. "Yes. Mr. Guo, that is roughly double what I was earning at a firm with 300 lawyers. "Yes. And you know that I have just publicly lost a case." "I read about it," I said. "It is why I called you." She went very still. I meant it as a joke about market value. She took it as something else entirely, and I watched a woman who had spent 11 days being told she was worthless decide in real time that somebody had looked at the worst week of her life and seen a reason to hire her. She did not say anything. She signed. Then she went home and cried about it, which I only know because Xinhua told me 2 years later and should not have. I will not break the law, and I will not break my own conscience. If that is a problem, I will leave now. That is the easiest condition anyone has ever given me. Then she read the number and stopped talking for a while. Her first day on the job, she found a hole in my employment contract. The advanced salary clause did not require repayment if a worker resigned mid-month. She wrote the correction in by hand, in blue ink, and handed it back to me. Not yet started, and she had already sealed off a leak. Then it turned out there was no desk for her, because the office was full, so I put her on remote work with a home office allowance, and she sat in her apartment for 4 days, growing steadily more disturbed. "You have paid me 1 million yuan, she said on the phone, "and you will not give me anything to do. Enjoy it. I would like a task. Any task." I thought about it, and gave her legal literacy lectures for the staff, which she has been delivering ever since, at a frequency that later became its own problem. Before any of that, though, I have to tell you how the 4 million died, because it is the only time in this entire story that the person who ruined me was me. The new equipment set came out of modeling on schedule. Makai asked how I wanted it released. "How do you normally do it?" "Gotcha, a few thousand yuan for a guaranteed pull usually. Lower the drop rate to the floor, set the guarantee at 100,000, and publish the exact probability table in the most prominent position on the screen." He stared at me. "Mr. Guo, nobody will buy that." "Exactly," I said, and then, because he was still standing there, "People deserve transparency." He wrote it down. Of course he did. Then I went into the wildlands wearing the new set and deleted the tyrant's entire guild in a single swing, and I typed something unforgivable in the local channel, and I logged off feeling like a god. In a villa on the other side of the country, a young man named Guo Han checked the combat logs, confirmed I was not cheating, and worked out that I was simply wearing a set that costs 100,000 yuan to guarantee. He wants to compare equipment with me, he said. He bought 3 of them, 300,000 yuan in one evening, because his feelings were hurt. The second staff banquet happened that same week, and I still enjoy the memory. 60 people now. Sun Yong announced it at Kongshui, where the 7,000 yuan office chairs had already caused a small crisis of faith. We took the company bus, which immediately gave me the idea for a second company bus. I booked the entire upper floor of the Xingyu. The bill came to 72,000. Then the manager, delighted, upgraded me to a membership tier and applied a 10% discount, and it dropped to 64, and I had to order more lobster and crab, 2 of everything, to repair the damage. And then I took my revenge, which was food. I went from seat to seat with a serving spoon. Guoming received an entire duck leg, half a bottle of red wine, and a mountain of prawns, delivered personally, with warm words about how hard he had been working lately. Ma Kai got a whole pot of the 800 yuan soup. Lin Xiaoming, who had poured every single drink at the first banquet, was served a suckling pig and told kindly that he could take 3 sittings over it if he needed to. They groaned. They kept eating because the boss was watching and the boss was smiling. Somebody down the far end said that Mr. Guo is perfect in every respect except one, which is that he is far too good to his employees. The canteen opened 2 days after that, with a red carpet and a balloon arch and flower baskets from the contractor. I lit the first flame on the range myself for luck. I played table tennis with Xinhua upstairs and lost twice. Then I came down, checked the panel, and the fund read 300,308 yuan. An hour earlier, it had read 308, 4 million yuan, gone, 2 hours on the clock. And this time it was not Sun Yang, and it was not Guoming. It was a rich 22-year-old in a villa with hurt feelings, spending 300,000 yuan on a loot box I had personally engineered to be unbuyable, inside a game I owned, in order to beat a player who was me. I had shot myself with my own gun, at range, on purpose, blindfolded, settlement completed, new fund, 8 million, new period, 2 months. The side quest paid out the same evening. My reward for acquiring a second company was 10 songs from a parallel world, delivered to my inbox, and when I opened the file, I found that the system had helpfully adjusted the credits so that the original performer of all 10 was me. I closed it. Singing means concerts. Concerts mean fame. Fame means people looking very closely at a man whose businesses all lose money in ways that do not quite add up. I logged into the game one last time and got trampled flat by 3 sets of top-tier gear. Fine, I thought, lying on the respawn screen. The next set does not go in the store at all. The next set drops for monsters at the lowest possible rate. You cannot buy it. You can only earn it. Please remember that sentence. It comes back for me later with interest. The 8 million cycle was the first time I actually had a strategy. 800,000 to charity, that is the 10%. 1.6 million on computers, air conditioning, snack cabinets, and greenery for Kang Shui. 600,000 in payroll, a company bus over $1 million, plus a driver. And a full sports day with prizes and a rented stadium, and sitting in the corner like a smell, 400,000 of remaining payment on Sun Yang's million yuan order. The furniture center was a joy. Bunk-style loft beds in solid timber, 9,998 each. There are cheaper ones, the salesman said helpfully. The cheap ones are particle board. Formaldehyde, you cannot put children on that. 7 in stock, the rest on order. A double bed for Grandma Guo, desks and chairs for every child. Rubber safety surfacing for the yard, and a proper play structure to go on it. Xinhua tried to write it down as a personal debt. She actually pulled out her phone and started calculating. 8 months of my salary, she said. I can pay it back over. Stop, it is not my money. It is the company charity fund. It belongs to the workshop and the studio as much as it belongs to me. The orphanage is only the first place it goes. She looked at me the way she had looked at me in the workshop on her first day, and I felt like a fraud, and I also could not have told her the truth if my life depended on it. 200,000 out of 800. I would find the rest of it later. Pan Long recommended a friend for the bus. Song Peng Tao, 10 years driving coaches, laid off because a younger man was cheaper. I found him hauling cement at 100 yuan a day and doing night watchman shifts on top of it because his son was getting married and there was a mortgage. 8,000, Pan Long told him. Full insurance. Would I lie to you? Then I gave Pan Long a raise to 10,000 because the new man could not be earning the same as the man who came first, and Pan Long went quiet in the front seat for a while. He had also quit smoking. Completely. I asked him about it once, and he said the boss does not smoke, so the transfer to the orphanage went out at 541,680 yuan. Xinhua saw the confirmation, and something strange happened to her face. She told He Min about it that night, and what she said was that she felt empty. Since she was 15 years old, she had been holding that building up with her own 2 hands and 3 jobs, and a single transfer had just closed the entire purpose of her life. Then start living for yourself, He Min said. That is not a tragedy, that is a Tuesday. I brought Kang Shui up to the same standard as the factory next, 2 days off. Overtime abolished, and every hour of overtime any of them had worked in the past year paid out retroactively at double rate. Full social insurance, 500 yuan grocery cards monthly, meal allowance, sports day in a month with prizes. Ma Kai asked permission to run overtime for the project. Hire more people instead. The office is 150 square meters. There is nowhere to put them. Then rent more space. Sun Yang, listening from the corner with his notebook, decided that the boss was building a foundation for something enormous and told everyone so. Chen Hao came to see me around then. He is the quiet one, the machine man, and he stood in my doorway turning his cap over in his hands for a full minute before he asked whether his wife could be hired as a cleaner. 2,000 would be plenty, he said. We only really need a room for married couples. 4,000, full insurance, and there is a couple's room. Then, on his way out, he mentioned casually that Guo Ming had set up a competition between the two cutting lines, losing Team Bai's lunch, and efficiency had roughly doubled without a single minute of overtime. Guo Ming, again. So I promoted him out of the workshop. 2 positions at once, procurement and logistics, 10,000 to 15,000. Mr. Guo, I cannot use office software. I cannot even do spreadsheets. Wonderful, I said, and then, out loud, you will learn. I believe in you. I put Chen Hao on the workshop instead, at 10,000, and discovered within a week that Chen Hao repairs the machines himself in his spare time and had already modified one so that 3 operations became 2. There is no escape. There has never been any escape. I bought the bus. 1.29 million, the most expensive on the lot. And then the canteen opened, and the canteen made me famous in a way I had not planned for at all. 6 dishes, unlimited refills, fridges full of drinks and beer, 2 enormous televisions in the dining hall, massage chairs and billiards on the 2nd floor, free, for everyone on staff. Workers from the neighboring factories started wandering in because they assumed a new restaurant had opened. That is not an exaggeration. We had to install electronic gates within a month, and we had to install them because somebody stole the billiard balls. I want it noted that they took only the balls and left the cues, which suggests planning. The first week was the best week. I sat upstairs by the window at lunch and watched a man from the machine tool plant across the yard come in, look at the 6 dishes on the counter, look for the price list, fail to find one, then go and find a member of staff to ask what the cheapest option was. There is no price, she told him. It is free, but you have to work here. He stood there for a while. Then he went back out to the yard and I watched him tell 3 other men, and I watched all 4 of them come back in and do exactly the same circuit and get exactly the same answer. Chao Donghai came on the Thursday. He is the one who had flatly refused to believe in paid weekends and had announced he would come and see for himself, and he did, and Chen Hao signed him in as a guest and sat him down with a plate of braised ribs. I did not speak to him. I watched from upstairs. He ate the ribs. Then he looked around the room, at 2 televisions and air conditioning and men in clean overalls taking a second helping without asking anybody, and he stopped eating, and he sat there for a while with his hands flat on the table. 6 months later, he pulled 80% of his own factory out the door behind him, and the mechanical plant halted production, and I ended up renting their empty building. That started here, with ribs. Then Guo Ming announced the bus from the canteen steps, because Guo Ming cannot resist a stage. He told them the boss had put more than 1 million yuan into a coach so that nobody would stand for 40 minutes in August, and that the driver was a man with 10 years of experience who had been laid off for being expensive, and that the first run was Monday at 7. And a man on the 3rd row stood up with a bowl still in his hand and said that if he ever caught anybody in this building slacking off, he would deal with them personally before management ever heard about it. The whole floor agreed, out loud, in unison. I was eating dinner by the window, and I put my chopsticks down and looked at my rice for quite a long time. Xinhua, sitting opposite, wrote something in her notebook. What was that? Mr. Guo does not like lamb ribs. She had been watching my plate. She had not heard a word of it. And that is somehow the detail from that entire evening that I have never been able to put down. Chao Donghai, the man who refused to believe in paid weekends, came to see for himself, ate a plate of braised ribs in a room with air conditioning, and stopped arguing. Guo Ming announced the bus to the workshop from the steps. He told them the boss had put more than 1 million yuan down so that nobody would have to stand on a bus for 40 minutes in August, and a man on the 3rd row said loudly that if he ever caught anyone slacking off, he would be the first to deal with them himself. The whole floor agreed. I was eating dinner by the window when I heard it, and I put my chopsticks down and looked at my rice for a while. Xinhua, sitting opposite, wrote something in her notebook. I asked what it was. Mr. Guo does not like lamb ribs. Sun Yong, in his new company, in his new industry, about which he knew nothing, negotiated the office lease down from 75 yuan a square meter to 64. He saved me 11,000 yuan in a field he had entered 9 days earlier. Wherever that man goes, he saves my money. It is not a skill. It is a condition. Total spend on Kang Shui that cycle, 2.2 million. Then Lin Xin found the lunchbox thing, and by Lin Xin, I mean Guo Ming, obviously. The canteen had electronic gates by then, because outsiders had started coming in, and someone had stolen the billiard balls. But Lin Xiaoming had a problem, which is that he cooked with a margin for error, and every night the margin went in the bin. Guo Ming looked at the bins and had an idea, and the idea was 15 yuan. Lunchboxes sold at the factory gate. 31 boxes went in the first 20 minutes. He gave one to the security guard for free as advertising, which was a masterstroke, because the security guard told everybody, 471 yuan. Then it was 10,000 yuan in half a month. Then Guo Ming came to me with a plan to make 200 boxes a day, which he calculated at 3,000 profit daily and 100,000 a month, and he was so pleased with himself that his ears were red. My counterattack was, I think, the best improvisation of my career. That is unfair to the kitchen staff, I said. They are doing extra work. Head chefs plus 1,000, kitchen assistants plus 500. And then, since it would be unjust to raise one department only, every manager in every company plus 1,000 and every line worker plus 500, Kang Shui included. Guo Ming got a raise for costing me money. Also, I said, looking directly at Lin Xiaoming, until sports day, the morning run is 15 laps. Meanwhile, the 3 graduates I had hired specifically because they could not sell anything went to see Sun Yang and brought him tea as a gift. He accepted it. And then he opened his contacts and handed them the entire client list he had spent more than 10 years building. Every name, every relationship, free. A teacher for a day is a father for life, one of them said. 2 weeks later, they came back with 1.3 million yuan in orders. I called all 3 in and had them explain, cheerfully, exactly where the leads had come from. So it was him, I said. I moved him to a different company, and he is still doing this to me. And on the same day, the canteen reported that leftover lunchboxes had cleared 10,000 yuan. One of them earns money for me, the other saves it. They are a matched pair, and they are going to bury me. I went to see the lunchbox window myself because I did not believe the numbers. The bell went and men came across that yard at a jog. 31 boxes were gone in 5 minutes. A guy at the front shouted, "Brother Ming, this is my 10th time." I stood there and watched the money arrive. Then I walked back to the office and increased everybody's salary again. I should explain what my drop rate decision had actually done, because I did not find out for another 3 weeks, and when I did, I had to sit down. Guo Han announced a bounty in his guild, 10,000 yuan for every piece of the new set brought to him. Nobody delivered. He raised it to 20, then 30, then 50,000 yuan per item. Chen Jing, the man I had killed in the wildlands, did not sleep properly for 2 weeks. He lived on energy drinks and killed the same monster for 14 days and got 1 glove. A professional gold farming studio took the contract, gave up after 5 days, and then, being businessmen, posted the job on every forum and gaming group in the country, which is how several thousand strangers arrived in my dying game and started paying for accounts so they could grind. I did not know any of this. I was busy planning a sports day. The system caps events at 1 million yuan and 1 per quarter. I read that as a target, not a limit. Prizes doubled. So every one of my 80 employees got 170 prizes, 760,000 yuan. Points for placing in each event, highest total picks first. Everyone picks something. And then I discovered the loophole I am proudest of in my entire career, which is that the boss is also an employee. The system had no objection, none. I could compete. I could take 2 prizes. So I invented an event, 50-meter competitive walking. Xinhua's proposal for the venue came in at 50,000 yuan, and she described it as economical and sensible. Far too conservative. We rented Yunfen Stadium at 50,000 a day. Catering, hired cleaners, hired security, professional hosts, professional judges, photographers with drones, and a commemorative film, 220,000 on the day itself. I wrote the banners myself. Work has value, but health is worth more. Efficiency comes from the balance of labor and rest. If you are tired, do not force yourself. People walking past the stadium stopped to read them and laughed and said that if the boss ever saw this, he would go through the roof. The uniforms were made in my own workshop, which cost me nothing and irritated me for the rest of the day. 16 events. Some people entered all 16, and then came the 50-meter walk. I stepped up to the line and looked to my right, and there they were. Sun Yang, Guo Ming, Lin Xiaoming, Guo Fan, Ma Kai, all 5 of them. The starting gun went, and I walked, and 5 grown men walked precisely 1 meter behind me with expressions of enormous physical strain, and stayed exactly 1 meter behind me for 50 meters. A spectator said, loudly, that this is not competitive walking. This is the boss going for a stroll with his entourage. 1 minute, 9 seconds. Gold. I want to be precise about the finish because it was witnessed by 200 people and a drone. At 40 meters, I risked a look to the side. Sun Yang was exactly level with my shoulder and no further. His face was the color of a man doing something extremely difficult. He had, I realized, been managing his pace with enormous care for the entire distance in order to remain precisely 1 meter behind me. Guo Ming, on the other side, was in genuine distress because Guo Ming is competitive by nature and was fighting his own body. Guo Fan had started too fast, overtaken me at 15 meters, realized what he had done, and spent the next 20 meters walking backwards into position, which the drone caught and which is still the most watched clip from that entire day. Lin Xiaoming had abandoned the concept at 30 meters and was simply walking. I crossed the line and the stadium made a noise, and Guanchang announced my time with the professional enthusiasm of a man who has decided not to think about anything. I stood there holding a medal I had commissioned, in an event I had invented, in a stadium I had rented, having beaten 5 men who were physically restraining themselves from beating me. Then Ma Kai, who had come forth, said something to Sun Pengfei that I overheard on the way past. He does not even look out of breath. He must train. I have never trained for anything in my life. The host, a professional named Guan Qiang who had been hired for the day, looked at the prize table and lost his composure on the microphone. Phones at 6,188, tablets, vouchers, 600,000 yuan of merchandise for 80 people, 2 prizes each, including last place. Guo Fan took first overall and asked to have his photograph taken with me. Then somebody started a chant, and 80 people chanted that they loved the boss, and I stood there in a rented stadium with a whistle around my neck, feeling the temperature drop out of my body. Lin Xiaoming came dead last in the entire event, 1 single point, and collected a prize for the first time in his life, and got quietly emotional about it near the drinks table. Then Chen Hao asked if we could repair 2 of the sewing machines. Replace all of them, I said. The most expensive models. 500,000 did not cover it, 1.4 million did. He then went and inspected the machines personally on his day off, and took his wife along because that was the only way they got to spend time together, and I gave him a formal written warning for unauthorized overtime, which is the only disciplinary action in the history of my company. Guo Fan was delighted. New machines, he told everyone, means a 30% capacity increase, which means we can accept more orders. That evening, Pan Long and Gao Ma knocked on my door and gave me their prizes. All 4 of them. A refrigerator, a washing machine, a television, and an air conditioner. They had not even cashed the vouchers yet. Your apartment is empty, Gao Ma said. We already have ours. I tried to give them back, and it went badly. You won them, I said. Both of you. In events you ran in. That is the entire point of the prizes. Our flat is full, Gao Ma said. Then sell the vouchers. They are not for selling. Then keep them for Ling Ling. She is 7. What does a 7-year-old want with a washing machine? I tried a 4th time, and Pan Long, who does not interrupt anybody, interrupted me. Mr. Guo, when I met you I had 31 copies of a printed page in my bag and no work. My wife was calculating meat by the 100 gram. My daughter had started saying she preferred vegetables, and she does not prefer vegetables. He stopped there because that is as far as he goes. Your flat is empty, he said. Ours is not. That is the whole of it. They had 2 prizes each, and they gave me all 4 and would not discuss it further, and Gao Ma went home and came back 9 minutes later with a bag of oranges in case I thought the conversation was over. I stood in my doorway holding a paper voucher for a refrigerator I had bought for a man who was giving it back to me and could not find anything at all to say. Pan Lingling pushed past my knees to turn on my television, which I did not own yet, then turned around and informed me with great disappointment that it was still not there. It is coming, I said. When? Soon. She accepted that, and went to switch my 1 lamp on and off instead, which is her other hobby, and I stood in the doorway for a while longer with a piece of paper in my hand. I have spent this entire year working out how to give money away without anybody benefiting from it, and a truck driver and a canteen cook had just beaten me at it, twice, in a corridor, using 4 vouchers and a bag of oranges. The dormitory came online that week, and I want to describe the walkthrough because it is the closest I have come to being caught. Lin Bo met me at the door with the handover sheet, and we went floor by floor. Bed, wardrobe, television, air conditioner, water heater, washing machine, private bathroom, everything on the list, everything from the top of the price band, exactly as ordered. Anything else, Mr. Guo? I looked around a finished room that was better than the flat I had lived in 6 months earlier and felt the specific panic of a man who has run out of things to buy. A floor cleaning robot, I said, in every room. He wrote it down without changing expression. That is why I like him. And the internet. Fiber is already in. 200 megabit. Gigabit. 1 line shared between 2 rooms, not the whole floor. That doubled the contract. He wrote that down too. The workshop came to look after dinner, and I stood at the end of the corridor and watched 60 people move through those rooms in complete silence, which is not how 60 people usually move. A man came out of room 4 and said to nobody that he had stayed in a hotel once for a wedding and it had not been this good. Chen Hao and his wife Lin Min got the couple's room with a proper double bed. They had been married 11 years and had spent 9 of them in different provinces, seeing each other twice a year, because that is what the work required. He did not say anything to me. He shook my hand for slightly too long and then went and stood by the window for a while. I went back to my office and sat down and looked at the spend sheet, and the number was enormous and I felt nothing about it at all, which was new and which worried me more than the number did. Bed, wardrobe, television, air conditioner, water heater, washing machine, private bathroom. And then I added a robot floor cleaner to every room at several thousand each, and gigabit internet on a line shared between 2 rooms. The workshop went to look after dinner, and somebody said it was better than a hotel, which it was, because I had checked. Chen Hao and his wife Lin Min got the couple's room with a double bed. They had been married 11 years and had lived apart for 9 of them. Then Guo Fan appeared in my doorway with a smile. I have a Pavlovian response now. My stomach drops. How much? Only 200,000, Mr. Guo. I made him lead the morning run. Every morning, in place of Sun Yang, it costs him an hour of client time daily, and it is the only weapon I have. I put 1.6 million into the new Kangshui project and told Ma Kai not to hurry, that slow work is quality work, and meant that the later it launches, the later it starts earning. And he said, actually, Mr. Guo, excellent news. Tianlong has returned to profitability. I said nothing. And it is entirely down to your strategy, he continued. You provoke the wealthy players, then you cut the drop rate to nothing. So the only way for them to compete was to hire farmers. The farmer accounts pay for monthly cards. Our concurrent numbers have tripled. I sat down. I had done that. I had personally, deliberately, with premeditation, designed a system that made a dying game profitable in an attempt to make it lose money by being spiteful in a video game. They will stop, I said, mostly to myself, as soon as the tyrant finishes his set. Ma Kai, meanwhile, could not understand my silence, so he went to Sun Yang, who is universally regarded as the only man who truly understands me. Sun Yang considered the question at length and delivered his verdict. The boss has set the direction. The execution is our job. Out of that sentence came the complete reform of Tianlong, free equipment replacing paid equipment, accelerated leveling for low tiers, new classes, raid bosses, cosmetics for whales instead of stats for whales, and buying items back from the gold farmers at company expense. I will put Tianlong back on top, Ma Kai told him. I found out when I sneezed. Xinhua brought me cold medicine instead of coffee, and while I was drinking it, I opened the game one last time to see how bad things were, and the general chat was solid farming advertisements, and the wildlands were carpeted with players. I uninstalled it. If I play any more of this, I said out loud, I am going to lose 8 million yuan. Xinhua, standing in the doorway, watched her boss pull a game out of near death and then quietly delete it from his own machine without a word of triumph, and wrote something in her notebook that I have never been brave enough to ask about. Guo Jiang called to say a 2,000 square meter tenant was folding, unable to carry 600,000 a year in rent. I took it. The old sewing machines went to scrap, which returned 100,000 yuan to the fund. I want it noted that I tried 4 separate arguments on the system to avoid that and lost all 4. Then the machine supplier offered training. 8 to 10 places, 20 days, accommodation and meals covered by the factory. I put my 2 best salesmen on that bus, Guo Fan and He Na. 20 days off the market. The system permitted it on condition that at least 1 salesman remain, so Deng Ji stayed behind, and Deng Ji is not a closer, and that was rather the point. I added a 500 yuan daily travel allowance per person, which came to 100,000, which cancelled out the scrap money exactly. Kang Shui, meanwhile, was committing crimes. 3 teams had been doing overtime secretly, at home, on weekends, and submitting their tasks early. I did not ask you to do this, Ma Kai said, genuinely frightened. Do not worry, Director Ma, they said. We understand. Nobody in my organization has ever understood anything, and Guo Han, in his villa, was finally getting somewhere. 8 items collected, 6 of them unique. He read the new patch notes, saw the free equipment and the new classes and the cosmetics, and made a decision that I did not need in my life. He decided to stockpile, buy every piece of gear the farmers would sell him, hold it, and either sell it high when the veterans came back or arm his guild with it. The veterans did come back, and one of them mattered. A world announcement went across every server. The Tyrant's Guild had taken the first kill on the world boss, and somewhere else entirely, a young man who had not logged in for years read that announcement, saw a name he recognized from a very old feud, and came back. Chiang Jianhua, guild name, Lingyan Pavilion, which he had named after a Huang Dynasty Hall of Merit, because he is that sort of person. He topped up 500,000 yuan, 5 complete sets. 2 extremely rich young men had found each other in my game, and I had built the arena, and I had personally taunted both of them into it. My workers, meanwhile, were on the 20th day of a 20-day trip that I had just extended. Changling CNC is a public company with 60,000 square meters of floor space. Its canteen has ceiling fans that are not wired to anything, no air conditioning, 4 dishes, mostly fat, and it charges 10 yuan a meal. Its dormitory is 2 bunk beds, 1 steel locker, and a toilet down the corridor. My people sat in that canteen eating watery congee and pickles, 10 yuan a portion, deducted from wages, under ceiling fans that turned out not to be connected to anything. Guofan called Hey Na over on the second day and pointed at the fans. Are they decorative? They were installed, a local worker told them, for the inspection. The dormitory was 2 bunk beds, a steel locker, and a toilet at the end of the corridor, shared by 22 men. There was 1 plug socket per room. They queued for it. On day 4, somebody from my factory tried to explain the Changfeng canteen to a Changling worker and was not believed. He was accused of showing off. He pulled out his phone and produced photographs, and the argument stopped. Then a different and much worse conversation started at that table, which was every man in it asking whether my company was hiring. On day 9, Guofan wrote in the group chat that the machines here are genuinely excellent and the training is genuinely useful, and he would like to state for the record that he was wrong to complain. On day 16, he wrote that he missed the canteen. On day 18, somebody wrote that he missed the first morning the air conditioning went in. And Hina, who is not sentimental about anything, wrote that she missed a dormitory room she had never actually slept in because she had been sent away 3 days before it opened. Guofan called me personally to ask to come home early. Learning has no end, I said. Frankly, your attitude concerns me. Then I extended them by 10 days and added another 100 yuan a day each, and if the system had permitted it, I would have paid 200,000 yuan to keep those 2 men in that dormitory until autumn. Their host, a man named Sun Bo, delivered the news of the extension over breakfast as a happy surprise in front of everyone. He told me later he had worked in industrial hospitality for 12 years and had never heard a silence like it. Another said he missed the first day the air conditioning went in. A third said he missed the dormitory he had not even had time to move into. Guofan called me personally to ask to come home. Learning has no end, I said. Your attitude concerns me. I extended them by 10 days and added another 100 yuan per day each. If the system had allowed it, I would have paid 200,000 to keep them there for 6 months. Their host, a man named Sun Bo, delivered the news of the extension personally, over breakfast, as a treat. He described their reaction as a silence he had never encountered in 12 years. Back home, Tianlong shipped 3 updates in 2 weeks, and the player survey came back glowing, and Sun Yang noticed that everybody at Kongshui looked exhausted and worked out why, and decided that heroes should not go unrecognized, which is how the boss found out. I found out first from a video, actually. I was scrolling short videos late at night, dutifully ignoring the streamers thanking viewers for private jets while I looked at my own 2,000 yuan balance, and an analysis video came up. A classic game killed by pay-to-win has gone free-to-play. Equipment now drops instead of being sold. The company is buying items back from farmers with its own money. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. This is a catastrophe, I thought. Then I said it out loud in an empty apartment. The next morning, I got the full report. Makai presented it with pride. They had waited until the numbers stabilized so they could surprise me. Every element of the reform was attributed in the document to me. Then Sun Yang, beaming, informed me that for 2 solid weeks every team had been working overtime at home, including weekends, out of loyalty. I paid all of it at double rate and banned it permanently. Profit for the period, 200,000 yuan. I asked the system whether I could shut the game down. A product cannot be discontinued while profitable. 3 consecutive months of losses are required. I asked what else counted as fun money and got 2 very important answers. Money already sitting in the game company's accounts counts. Unspent project budgets and unpaid customer orders do not. I ordered daily revenue reports. Daily. And I handed Makai complete, sole, unsupervised authority over the new project because the last thing I needed in my life was a second profitable game. That is the decision I would take back if I could take back exactly one. Lin Xin saved me around then without knowing it by asking a question while hunting for something to do. You have bought extremely expensive equipment, she said. Are you planning to launch your own brand? I put down my cup. Your own brand. No salesman chasing orders, no clients. You set your own price, and you can set it far above the market, and nobody has heard of you, so nobody buys it, and the warehouse fills up with beautiful unsold clothing made on 1.4 million yuan of machinery. It is a perpetual motion machine for losing money. I turned down Guo Jiang's order for 2,000 more uniform sets that afternoon, and he took it very personally. Then Chang Jianhua topped up again, and daily revenue hit 1 million yuan, and I got in the car. Remove every piece of paid equipment from the store, I told Makai. All of it. Leave only the passes. Monthly 10 yuan, weekly 2, daily 1 jiao. Mr. Guo, 1 jiao is 10 cents. That is free. Correct. I need to explain the 1 jiao decision properly, because it is the single most destructive order I have ever given, and I gave it with total confidence. Daily revenue had touched 1 million yuan. Two very rich young men were in an arms race inside my game, and every item they bought went into my fund. So I went there personally, and I stood in the middle of their open plan office, and I killed the store. Remove every piece of paid equipment, all of it. Today. Makai's pen stopped. Mr. Guo, that is over 90% of revenue. Yes, that is the business model. It was. Now the store sells passes only. Monthly, 10 yuan. Weekly, 2 yuan. Daily, 1 jiao. The room went quiet in a way I had learned to distrust. Mr. Guo, Sun Pengfei said carefully, 1 jiao is 10 cents. That is not a price. That is a rounding error. Nobody prices anything at 1 jiao. Correct. I want you to understand my reasoning, because it was airtight. Whales cannot spend. Whales are the revenue. Remove the ceiling on spending and you remove the ceiling on earning, and a game where the theoretical maximum a human being can pay you is 18 yuan and 10 fen per month is a game that cannot hurt me. I had done the arithmetic on the drive over. 18 yuan and 10 fen. That is the absolute worst case per player. Then Sun Yong, who had been in the games industry for 11 weeks, cracked his knuckles and explained it to the room. This is low margin, high volume. 200,000 players at a jiao each is 20,000 yuan a day, every day, from people who would never have paid at all. Sun Pengfei, their office director, added that the passes could carry a small luck bonus to drop rates and an instant respawn so that even paying players would buy them. They wrote it up. They implemented it. They thanked me. The staff banquet that quarter was at the 5-star Emperor Hotel, 11 tables, the most expensive item in every category, 2 portions of everything, 240,000 yuan. Then Makai found me between the 3rd and 4th course to report that the reform had worked and the game had taken 300,000 yuan in 24 hours, and I looked out across 11 tables at 400 bottles of beer. Replace it, I told the floor manager. Sorry, sir. All of it, every bottle, red wine, the 1,000 yuan one. 300 bottles to start. He asked me to repeat that. Then he asked me to repeat it again in front of a colleague. Then the beer left the room on trolleys while 200 people watched it go in total silence. Then I went table to table. At the first table, nobody was drinking because everyone was waiting to see whether the boss was joking. I poured for them myself. At the second table, 4 young women from the coffee chain had about a centimeter each in their glasses. Drink up, I said. Red wine is excellent for the skin. At the third table, somebody had poured a glass and then not touched it for 20 minutes. Are you raising goldfish in there? Lin Xiaoming saw me coming from 3 tables away, and I watched him consider seriously whether he could get under the table. 236 bottles, from 300, and the total for the evening came to just over 300,000 yuan, which I achieved by ordering additional lobster while the room was still recovering from the wine. Xinhua drank 2 bottles entirely on her own. I found this profoundly moving. Here at last, I thought, is one person in this organization who understands what I am doing and is actively assisting. She had to be carried back to the dormitory on Guofan's back, and in the morning she came in on time, on the dot, pale as paper, and put a coffee on my desk and apologized for her conduct. You have nothing to apologize for, I said, with total sincerity. She wrote that down. Ma Kai found me between courses. Mr. Guo, the reform worked. 300,000 in revenue in 24 hours. I looked at the beer on 11 tables. Replace it, I said. Red wine, the 1,000 yuan one, 300 bottles. I went table to table personally. I told the women that red wine is excellent for the skin. I looked at a table that had poured about a centimeter each and asked whether they were raising goldfish in there. 236 bottles. Xinhua drank 2 entirely on her own, which I found deeply moving because I concluded she was the only person in the building who understood what I was trying to do and was helping me spend it. She had to be carried back to her dormitory on somebody's back. In the morning, Tianlong revenue read 900,000 and climbing, and I did something I had never done before. I filed a complaint against the system. I would like to describe what it is like to argue with a voice inside your own head that controls your entire financial life, because it is not like arguing with a person, and it is not like praying. It is like filing a support ticket with a wall. There is a defect in your design, I said, out loud in my own office at 8 in the morning, alone, and I checked the door twice first. Nothing. You have set a settlement condition of near total expenditure. My revenue from one subsidiary alone now exceeds 30 million yuan a month, and it is still climbing. The fund refills faster than any expenditure channel you permit me can drain it. That is not a challenge. That is a design fault. Nothing. You are asking me to empty a bathtub with the tap open, then punishing me for the water level. And then there was a pause. I want to be clear about how unusual that is. That thing has never once hesitated. It refuses purchases before I have finished imagining them. It has interrupted me mid-sentence. It vetoed something I decided in a dream. 4 seconds. I counted them. Recalculating. Settlement rules updated. Method 1. Residual under 1%. Full conversion. Method 2. Residual under 50%. 1% of the amount spent. Method 3. Residual over 50%. 1/10 of 1%. I read it 3 times. It is not generous. Method 2 is a consolation prize and everybody involved knows it, but it is the difference between a year of work producing 3,000 yuan and a year of work producing 127,000. And more than that, it was an admission. I had told a god its system was broken. The god had checked. The god had agreed. I sat in that chair for a long time afterwards with one thought, which was that a thing which can be argued with once can be argued with again. I have not worked out what to argue for next, but I have started a list, in the same notebook as everything else, on the page after Gao Yue Air. I had argued with a god and won a consolation prize. Then I emptied everything I could reach. Project bonuses capped at 30% of project profit, which came to 900,000 across 43 people. 100,000 each to the 3 directors, 50,000 each to 4 team leads, and the remaining 36 people received 11,111 yuan and 11 fen each because that is what the division produced. They spent a week trying to decode it. The prevailing theory was that the boss was signaling that they were all ones, meaning individuals, meaning he saw each of them. Residual at settlement, 523,358. Converted, 74,766 yuan. 8 million lost. But for the first time in my life, I walked away from a settlement with more than lunch money. New fund, 15 million. New period, 4 months. And because I had broken their rules, the system granted me the right to open 2 more companies in unrelated industries and issued a special mission, spend under 5 million in 2 months and receive a mysterious reward. I read that twice, laughed out loud in an empty office, and went home to see my parents. My father teaches at a middle school. My mother works a desk at the county government. They have spent 30 years being careful with money in the specific way that people are careful when they have watched their parents be careful. So I bought the appliances before I told them. That is a technique I recommend. Do it first, apologize second. My mother opened the front door, saw the boxes stacked in the hallway, and started calculating out loud in a rising tone, and by the time she got to the water purifier, she had reached the volume where the neighbors could contribute. Do you know what these cost? Roughly. Then why? Because they were there. We made dumplings. My father sat across from me pinching the edges shut with the concentration he brings to marking papers, and after a while he said, without looking up, that I should be careful in business. Do not lose money, he said. Whatever else, do not lose money. I would love to lose money. He laughed, because he thought it was a joke, and it was the truest sentence I said all year. Then my mother started on. Marriage, which is a subject she approaches the way a general approaches a river crossing, and while she was listing candidates she mentioned in passing that a relative of my sister-in-law had gone bankrupt running a milk tea shop in Chen City. I put down my chopsticks. Bankrupt how? Completely. 300,000 yuan. Her family will not stop talking about it. Understand that I heard this the way a man dying of thirst hears the word well. I went to see them the next day, personally, with fruit, like a good young relative, and I sat in a living room and asked a woman named Chao Wen to describe her failure in as much detail as she could bear. She was mortified. She kept apologizing for boring me. I kept asking follow-up questions and taking notes, and after 20 minutes her sister came in from the kitchen and asked what on earth we were doing. He wants to hear about the tea shop, Chao Wen said, in the voice of a woman being executed politely. Why? I do not know. I got the whole thing eventually in order, and I am going to give it to you the way she gave it to me, because it is a masterpiece and I have never improved on it. She paid a franchise fee to a brand called Huo Huo Milk Tea. After the fee, the brand provided nothing, no marketing, no footfall data, no supply advantage, a logo, and a laminated recipe card. She took a unit on a street she liked because she liked it, without counting anything. There were 12 other tea shops on that street. 12. She counted them afterwards. She hired staff before she had customers, because she did not want to be understaffed on opening day. She refused to cut the recipe quality when the margins came in, which is the only decision in the entire sequence I genuinely respect and also the one that killed her fastest. And when it started going badly, she spent more on it because stopping felt like admitting it. 8 months. 300,000 yuan. Her entire savings and some of her parents. I know it was stupid, she said to her hands. It was not stupid. It was stupid. It was thorough, I said, and she laughed badly once. Her sister asked from the doorway, half joking, whether I could find her a job somewhere. Anything. Not management, obviously. Just something. I had written 11 lines in my notebook by then. Every one of them was a mistake, and I was reading them as a recipe. Wrong street, too many competitors, premium concept with no premium footfall, staff ahead of demand, refuse to cut quality, double down when losing, do all 6 on purpose, at scale, funded properly, and you have a machine. How would you feel, I said, about running a coffee chain? She thought I was mocking her. I had to say it 3 times, and on the 3rd time she stopped and looked at me properly and asked the question that every single person in my life eventually asks and that I have never once answered honestly. Mr. Guo, why me? Because you know exactly how it goes wrong. Which is true. It is entirely true. It is the truest thing I have ever said to an employee, and she wrote it down and has quoted it to her own staff ever since, and every time she quotes it, she means something completely different by it than I did. The brand was called Huo Huo Milk Tea. She had paid a franchise fee, and after the fee the brand had done precisely nothing for her, no marketing, no support, no traffic. The location was wrong, and there were 12 competing tea shops on the same street. 12 on one street. She had lost about 300,000 yuan in 8 months. Her sister asked, half joking, whether I could find her a job. I wrote down every mistake she had made in order, and it read like a recipe. Then I went and stood on that street. Next door to the dead tea shop was another dead business, cabin coffee, specialty beans, high concept, tasting notes on a chalkboard. It had gone under even faster and had taken more than 500,000 yuan with it because there is a Starbucks at the top of the street and a Starbucks at the bottom. Coffee, I thought. Coffee loses money better. I took both units, 80 square meters and 140, about 200,000 a year in rent, and I had the wall between them removed. And I made Chao Wen the general manager. 8,000 a month plus 1% of profits, which I considered an extremely safe promise. Mr. Guo, she said, I have to be honest with you. I sank my own shop. I do not have a good record. I know, I said. That is why. She thought that was a joke too. My logic. I want you to appreciate the elegance of it was that 1 plus 1 is greater than 2. A woman who can bankrupt a tea shop, put in charge of a concept that has already bankrupted a smarter person on the same street, is not a risk. She is a guarantee. Pan Guo was the part I did not plan for. Cao Wen came back from the capital with 9 trainee baristas, which I had authorized, and with the woman who had trained them, which I had not. She stood in my office in a coat that had been expensive 11 years ago and explained, without being asked, why she had left a large chain to teach. They kept shortening the extraction, she said. Every quarter, by a little, for throughput. Nobody notices in a single cup. Everybody notices in a year. I said so 4 times, and then I stopped saying it. Then she made me a cup on the sample machine, on my desk, from beans she had brought in her bag. I do not know anything about coffee. I want to be honest about that. What I know is that I drank it and put the cup down and looked at it. Then picked it up again, and Cao Wen was watching me and grinning like a lunatic. How much were you being paid? She told me. I raised her to management level before she had signed anything, on the stated grounds that with a master on staff we could justify charging even more, which was true and which was also the reason, and both of those things are the same sentence and only one of them is honest. I named it Nanhei Coffee, Nanhei. It happens to sound almost exactly like the phrase for hard to drink. Lin Xin caught it while typing the registration and looked up sharply, and I looked back at her with the blank open face of a man who has never had a thought in his life, and she decided she had imagined it. She was still doing the registrations, incidentally, and still had almost nothing else to do, and had started delivering legal literacy lectures to every department on a rotating schedule, which is a detail that becomes hilarious later, and I gave everybody another raise. 500 yuan for a month of service, 1,000 for 3, grocery cards from 500 to 1,000. A 1,000 yuan housing allowance for anyone renting, and a 1,000 yuan transport allowance for anyone living in the dormitory so that nobody could feel shortchanged either way. Xinhua reached 14,000 yuan a month in under 4 months of employment and sent almost all of it to an orphanage that no longer needed it and started buying the children books instead. Then Deng Zhi brought me 63 dealers, and I have to explain how because I would never have seen it coming. Deng Zhi was the salesman I kept behind when I exiled the other 2, on the grounds that he was the weakest closer in the department. He knew it. He had spent 2 weeks failing to recruit a single dealer from the open market and had gone quietly to pieces about it. Then he worked something out. He did not need strangers. He was surrounded every day by 200 people who would follow me off a cliff. So he went to Sun Yong first, because Sun Yong is the gate, and Sun Yong not only approved it, but signed up on the spot, having already resigned his wife from her job so she could run a shop. Ma Kai signed for a niece. Sun Pengfei signed because Ma Kai had. Cao Wen signed. Half the coffee chain signed. 63 people, 100,000 yuan franchise fee each, 6.3 million yuan of income generated entirely internally by the man I had kept specifically because he could not sell. I tried to unwind it. Our brand has no recognition yet, I said. There is a high probability they lose money. Explain the risks to them properly, and anybody who wants out can terminate without penalty. I did explain the risks, Mr. Guo. He looked slightly hurt. In detail, twice, before signing. They are all our own people. It would have been shameful to do otherwise, and it would have reflected on you. So they had all been fully informed and had all signed anyway because the boss's brand cannot fail. He then made it worse in a way I have never fully recovered from. He held the signing at Nanhei Coffee over 2 sessions and bought every single one of the 63 of 50 yuan Americano out of his own pocket because it was my coffee shop and he thought the money should go to me. 3,150 yuan of coffee revenue on top of 6.3 million from a man apologizing for his own inadequacy. Then I did the sales contracts, and the sales contracts were, I still maintain, a stroke of genius that immediately backfired. Since the factory was going to have its own brand, the sales team no longer needed to chase clients. They needed to recruit dealers, completely different skill. So I told them that for 1 full year, their commission would be paid at the best rate any of them had ever achieved, regardless of what they actually sold, even if they sold nothing at all, even if the brand failed entirely. I did that so they would relax. Guofan stood up. He looked around the room and then back at me and said, in a voice that had gone slightly unsteady, that the boss was sacrificing his own interests to protect theirs, and that he personally would not be relaxing. Nobody in that room relaxed. Several of them started working weekends. Then the New Year holiday hit Tianlong. 800,000 concurrent players. A streamer broadcast it for 9 days straight. 3.6 million yuan in 9 days. Ma Kai came to me with the promotional plan for the new project, and I told him flatly that good wine needs no signboard and that I did not want a single yuan spent on marketing. He wrote it down. He told Sun Yang it was the most confident thing he had ever heard a boss say. I expanded the workshop. 3.2 million in machinery, 60 new workers, and here is the part that genuinely upset me, which is that the new automated machines had made some of the old roles redundant, and I had to be talked out of keeping everyone on for jobs that no longer existed. We held internal elections for 11 supervisory posts, 16 candidates, secret ballot, everyone voted. Chen Hao won production director and got 4,000 more a month, and he made a speech that was 11 words long. And then Chao Donghai quit his job, and Chao Donghai brought down a factory. He was the man who had refused to believe in paid weekends and had come to see the canteen with his own eyes. He went back to his mechanical plant, and one afternoon, his supervisor fined him 50 yuan for looking at his phone and then ordered him to work late to make up for it. Chao Donghai took off his gloves, set them on the bench, and walked out. He said afterwards that he finally understood why young people quit so easily. It is not that they are soft, it is that they have seen the other thing. 80% of that workshop followed him out inside 2 weeks. The mechanical plant halted production and put its unit up for lease. Guo Jiang called me to say that a 2,000 square meter space had come free and told me confidentially that he suspected I had engineered it. I had not engineered it. I sat in my office and mentally apologized to a factory owner I had never met. Then I rented his empty building and turned it into an office block. That is who I am now. The charity fund hit its ceiling that month, and that was the first thing since the beginning that genuinely frustrated me. 10% of 15 million is 1.5 million. The orphanage could not absorb more than another 200,000 because the system looked at their accounts and informed me that their reserves were now adequate. I tried donating to established foundations. The system said no. It requires that over 90% of any donation reach the recipients directly and that I personally inspect every project. Personally, me, standing there. So I sat in my office with 1.3 million yuan I was legally required to give away and no legal way to give it away, which is a sentence I never expected to think. Cao Wen solved it by accident. She came in to report on the coffee build-out and while waiting showed me a video on her phone of a stray animal shelter on the edge of the city. They do not take money, Lin Xin said from the other chair. Only food. Every time they accept cash, the donors start demanding accounts and making scenes. Then send food, I said. 500,000 yuan of it. Cao Wen dropped her phone. 20 tons, 4 trucks. At the shelter, 2 men named Pan Guozhong and Hu Na were in the middle of an argument about whether they could take in 200 dogs seized from a trafficking operation. Half of them were sick. Treatment runs 1 to 3,000 yuan per animal. They did not have it, and they were about to say no. 4 trucks arrived while they were arguing. I went out to see it because the system requires personal inspection, and personal inspection meant standing in it. Pan Guozhong met me at the gate. He is a thin man in his 40s who has not had a full night of sleep since roughly 2019, and he had clearly been arguing all morning because his voice was gone. You are the food, he said. Not a donor. The food. I am the food. He shook my hand with both of his and then made me put on shoe covers because half his intake was still in quarantine. 200 animals came off that truck operation. Not 200 healthy dogs. 200 animals that had spent an unknown number of days in stacked cages. He walked me down the runs and named them as we went, because he names all of them, which I think is either the healthiest or the least healthy thing a person can do in that job. There was one with a missing eye that came to the front of the run and pressed itself against the mesh to be touched. There were several that could not stand up. There were 3 at the far end that Pan Guozhong did not stop at and did not name and walked slightly faster past, and I did not ask. Half of them had distemper. Treatment runs 1 to 3,000 yuan an animal. Hu Na had been standing in the office when the trucks arrived doing arithmetic that ended in the word no. We were going to have to refuse them, he said. This morning, I had the sentence ready. 20 tons of food in 4 trucks does not treat distemper, but it frees up every yuan that was going to be spent on feeding, and every yuan of that goes into medicine, and that is the difference between refusing 200 animals and accepting them. He worked that out loud, on his fingers, standing in a yard, then had to go and stand somewhere else for a minute. I did not say anything at all while I was there. I am not good at that kind of room. On the way out, I asked whether I could take some, because a factory is a large place and dogs need space, and he said yes immediately, and then watched my selection process with visible confusion, because I chose them by which ones were eating with the most enthusiasm. 4 huskies and a border collie. If you know anything at all about dogs, you already know what I had done. I had walked into a shelter containing 200 animals of every temperament available, and selected with great care the 5 most energetic breeds in the building on the grounds that they had good appetites. They ate everything. They ate the canteen surplus, all of it, every night, and they ate it enthusiastically. And that is how 100,000 yuan a month of lunchbox revenue quietly ceased to exist. I did not plan that. I want that on the record. It is the only accident in this entire story that went my way. 1 with a missing eye, several that could not stand, a few that were not going to make it, and everyone knew it. I did not say anything at all. I took 5 dogs back to the factory, and I chose them by which ones ate the most enthusiastically, which turned out to be 4 huskies and a border collie, and which turned out to be the worst selection criteria available. That is how the lunchbox business died, incidentally. I want you to know it was not deliberate. Once 5 large dogs lived at the factory, the canteen leftovers went to the dogs. No leftovers, no lunchboxes. 100,000 yuan a month of revenue simply evaporated, and I had to hold my face still while Guo Ming delivered the news like a man reporting a death. 240,000 a year, gone, and I did nothing. The workers from the industrial park came running across the yard at the usual time and found the window shuttered. One of them stood there and watched 2 buckets of braised pork and fried chicken go into a dog trough and said out loud that he eats worse than a dog. Then he corrected himself. He eats worse than 5 dogs. Hu Na turned up drunk at my office some weeks after that, which is how the next disaster started, not a little drunk. He arrived at 6 in the evening supported by Pan Guozhong, who apologized before the door had finished opening and who had clearly been trying to get him into a taxi for half an hour and had lost. He wants to tell you about the park, Pan Guozhong said. I have told him this is not the moment. He disagrees. Hu Na sat down heavily and started drawing on the back of a delivery note. A pet park, not a shelter, a park. Enclosures you can walk through, a hospital wing, a grooming block, a training ground where nothing is trained to perform, a whole section for the animals that will never be adopted because they are 12 years old and have 1 eye, where they simply live out their lives with grass and shade and people who come and sit with them. He drew for 11 minutes. The delivery note ran out and he continued on to a second one. Everybody says no, he said at the end. Everybody. 11 investors. 14 if you count the ones who did not take the meeting. Because it does not make money, Pan Guozhong said quietly, to me, not to him. We know that. We have modeled it. There is no version of this that returns capital. It is a guaranteed loss, and anyone with a calculator can see it in an afternoon. I looked at a drunk man and a delivery note. I will invest. He sobered up somewhere around 2 in the morning, apparently, because he was at my office at 8 the next day, looking gray, to withdraw the request. I was drunk. I should not have brought it to you. You have been extremely generous to the shelter already, and I am not going to take your money for something I know will not work. He meant it. He had come to take it back. That is the second time somebody has tried to protect me from myself that month, and it will not be the last. So I hit him with an aphorism because that is the only weapon that works on sincere people. There is nothing in this world that is impossible, I said, for a man who has made up his mind. He went very still. Then he asked me to repeat it and wrote it down on his phone and later had it done properly in calligraphy and framed and hung it on the wall of the site office where it hangs today above a photograph of a one-eyed dog. How much would you need? He asked. To start, 500,000? Add a 0. Mr. Guo. 5 million. He had to sit down on the floor of my office, which is not a thing that people do, and Pan Guozhong had to explain to him that it was really happening. He had a dream, and the dream was a pet park the size of a small theme park, a proper one, and every investor he had ever pitched had turned him down. It is a guaranteed loss, Pan Guozhong said, apologetically, holding his friend upright. We know. We have run the numbers ourselves. I will invest, I said. He sobered up overnight and came back to withdraw the request because he did not want me to lose money on his account, and I had to hold him in place with an aphorism. Nothing in this world is impossible to a man who has made up his mind. He wrote it out in calligraphy, framed it, and hung it on the wall of the site office, where it is to this day, above a photograph of a dog with one eye. How much would you need? He asked. 500,000? Add a zero. 5 million. Around the same time, I acquired 4 designers, and I acquired them by rejecting everyone competent. Pan Yanning came in with 3 friends and a portfolio case that had been repaired with tape. 8 candidates that morning. The first 4 had between 8 and 12 years of experience each, and every one of them, without exception, said a version of the same sentence in the interview. My strength is identifying trends quickly and adapting them. Adapting, that is the word they all use. One of them showed me a lookbook of her work, and I could not find a single garment in it that had not existed somewhere else first, and she was proud of that, because that is what the industry had trained her to be proud of. Feng, all 4. Then the graduates came in together, which is not how interviews work, and Pan Yanning did the talking. We would like to work as a group, she said. The 4 of us. Fine. She had clearly expected an argument and had to reorganize herself. We have been in the industry for a year, she said. Between us, we have been told 9 times that original work is too risky, that we should look at what is selling and produce something adjacent to it. 2 companies told us to buy overseas magazines and pull from them directly. And you did not want to. We did it, she said. For a year, that is why we are all leaving at the same time. Then she set her condition, and she set it before salary, which tells you everything. If we come here, we design entirely our own way. No copying, no adapting, no following. And I have to be honest with you, Mr. Guo, that is a genuine commercial risk. The public may simply not accept it. Sales may fall. I had to look at the window for a moment to get my face under control. Nobody will interfere with you, I said. Nobody at all. Not me. Not the sales department. Not anybody. She asked me to put it in the contract. Lin Xin wrote it in that afternoon and read it twice and asked me privately whether I understood that I had just contractually surrendered creative control of my product line to 4 23-year-olds. Yes. You are the first client I have ever had, she said, who negotiates exclusively against himself. 6,000 each. Full benefits. A studio of 50 square meters, which meant renting a 6th unit in the park. 9 months later, every original garment those 4 produced sold out, and the workshop had to run a second shift to keep up, and the trend reports that other companies were adapting from began to include photographs of my clothes. All 4 were fresh graduates. All 4 had spent a year being told by garment companies that original work is too risky, copy what is already selling, find the trend and follow it. 8 candidates interviewed. The 4 with a decade of experience each, one of whom described her core skill as rapidly identifying trends, went straight into the bin. Pan Yanning set a condition before signing. We want to design entirely, our own way. I have to be honest with you, that is a risk. The public may reject it and sales may fall. I had to physically restrain my own face. Nobody will interfere with you, I said. Nobody at all. 6,000 each, full benefits, plus allowances. They needed a studio of 50 square meters, which meant renting yet another unit. Meanwhile, Guo Ming, having run out of things to do, had started a video account. Happy Day at Work, Changfeng Clothing, the canteen, the dormitory, the sports day, 20 tons of dog food coming off a truck. He was buying traffic for it out of his own pocket. 7,000 followers. I painted slogans across the entire workshop wall in response. Eat first, sleep first, work third. Safety first, health second, work third. If you are tired, rest. Guo Ming stood in front of them, frowning, and I heard him work through it out loud. This is telling people to slack off, he said. Then his face cleared. No, the boss is protecting our health. Then he filmed the wall and posted it, and it did better than anything else on the account. While I was painting slogans on a wall, 2 rich young men were founding an esports club, and neither of them was doing it for money. Guo Han had finally completed his set, and had immediately discovered that the man he wanted to humiliate had vanished from the server. The bounty on my head produced a stream of imposters and nothing else. Then Shang Jianhua called him. Let us build a proper club, he said. You and I are the same animal. We have unlimited money, and none of it is ours. Our fathers made all of it. Do you not want to prove something with your own hands once before you die? They named it Tiange, 1 character taken from each of their guilds, and their first act was to organize an offline Tianlong tournament with real prize money. That tournament went on to the front page of Tigerhead Livestream, which is one of the 2 largest streaming platforms in the country. 1 million new players in 7 days, 2 million concurrent. Projected revenue, over 10 million yuan a month. Makai delivered that number to me personally, in my office, with his whole face lit up like a festival. Very good, I said through my teeth. Very good. That evening I went hunting for complaints. I walked the workshop floor asking people individually what was wrong, what hurt, what needed fixing. I needed a grievance, any grievance that I could throw money at. Nobody had one. 20 questions, 20 variations of everything is fine, Mr. Guo. Then I saw a medicated patch on the back of Pan Yi's neck. Pan Yi is a programmer at Kangshui, a graduate who had bounced through 3 companies being paid intern wages for senior work before she found us, and she had a cervical spine patch on because she sits at a screen 11 hours a day. I stopped walking. Neck strain from screen work, I announced, is an occupational injury. The company will cover all treatment. That would have been enough. But I was on a roll. Professional massage twice a week for every employee at company expense. Massage cushions fitted to every office chair, and a full medical screening for everyone every 3 months. Short-sightedness was next. Glasses covered, eye drops covered, and laser correction surgery covered in full, with the position and salary held during recovery. Not one person took the surgery. 40,000 yuan spent in total. 40,000. Tianlong earns that in the time it takes to describe it. The dogs, on the other hand, were an excellent investment. We took in another dozen. I had proper kennels built, brick, with windows and a small yard each, and Pan Guozhong came to inspect and said quietly that his shelter did not have accommodation of that standard. Guoming filmed it. Then Hu Na proposed a trained animal show for the park, and I killed it instantly. Because training is cruel, and because I had read enough to know it. And Guoming immediately proposed an alternative. A pet fashion show. Costumes, on the animals, which we could manufacture, in our own garment factory, opening an entirely new product category. I looked at him for a long moment and said that it was a wonderful idea. Sunbo from the mechanical plant delivered the new machines that week, and I made the mistake of letting him see the site. He walked through the dormitory, saw the television, the air conditioner, the private bathroom. He ate in the canteen, 6 dishes, free, unlimited. We have 60,000 square meters, he said on his way out. And after that comparison, we have nothing at all except floor space. The coffee shop swallowed money beautifully. 800,000 yuan of equipment, every item chosen from the top of the quote. Cao Wen went to the capital and came back with 9 trainee baristas and, more importantly, with their instructor, a woman named Pan Guo. I raised Pan Guo's salary to management level before she had signed anything, on the grounds that with a master on staff we could charge even more. Staff terms, 6,000 plus 0.1% of profit, plus 1,000 for housing, 1,500 for meals, and a 500 yuan card. Days off entirely voluntary, at double pay if you came in. An Americano at 50 yuan. Starbucks charges 30 at the top of the same street. No opening promotion, no discount, no coupons. Good wine needs no signboard. Cao Wen became general manager of the chain, and Pan Guo her deputy, both on 20,000 plus 3%, and I sat back and admired a machine designed from the first bolt to fail. Opening day was 2 hours of absolutely nothing, and I have never enjoyed 2 hours more. I sat at the end of the counter with a cup I was not drinking, and I watched the door. A woman came in at 9:10, walked to the board, read it, and turned around without stopping. A couple came in at 20 past. He read the board out loud, which is a mistake people make, and she said the word 50 in a tone I will remember on my deathbed, and they left. A man in a suit came in at 10 and actually ordered, and I nearly stood up in alarm. Then it emerged that he thought we were the other coffee place and left when he found out we were not. Cao Wen stood behind that counter and got quieter and quieter. Mr. Guo, she said eventually, we could do an opening promotion. First week half price, or a stamp card. No. A voucher then, just to get people through the door once, so they taste it. No promotions. Good wine needs no signboard. She wrote it down and looked like she wanted to be sick, and I felt for her, genuinely, and I did not move. Pan Guo said nothing at all. Pan Guo had spent 11 years training baristas in the capital, and she was standing in an empty room at 50 yuan a cup, and I could see her running the numbers and arriving at the same answer I had arrived at, which is that this shop cannot survive. Perfect. Ideal. Textbook. Then at 11 the door opened and it kept opening. My own staff. All of them. Both companies, on their day off, in their own clothes, having organized it in a group chat that I am not in. Flower baskets. Enormous ones. The funeral-adjacent kind, chest high, in aggressive pink. Money trees in ceramic pots, a waving cat with a solar panel in its arm, Sun Yang carrying 2 baskets at once because Guoming had bought 3. They filled the entire frontage. They filled it so thoroughly that the pedestrian flow had to route around them, and then people started coming in, not for the coffee, for the spectacle. Passers-by saw 20 flower baskets outside a new shop and concluded that something significant had opened and came in to look, and while they were in there, a fair number of them ordered something because it would have been awkward not to. 41 customers between 11 and 1. I stood in the corner of my own coffee shop watching my employees personally dismantle the most carefully engineered failure of my career with a display of affection, and I waited exactly 1 hour. Then I asked, with great regret, for the baskets to be removed. The pedestrian street is a shared space, I said. We should not block it. It reflects badly on us. Guo Ming carried them out again personally and told everyone that Mr. Guo refuses to take advantage even of a gift, which is the sort of thing that gets repeated in a company for a year. People came to the door, read the price list, and left. I watched 3 separate couples turn around at the threshold, and I was so happy I could have wept. Then my own staff arrived. All of them, both companies, with flower baskets and money trees and a waving ceramic cat, and they filled the entire pavement outside the door with them, and the flower baskets, being enormous and pink and impossible to ignore, started dragging people in off the street to see what had opened. I made them take the baskets away within the hour, citing the cleanliness of the pedestrian street. By the end of that cycle, I had spent 9 million yuan on cars, scooters, servers, and a chain headquarters, and Tianlong had earned 13 million. The fund was larger than when I started. I have spent a lot of nights lying on my back thinking about that sentence. The elderly turned up in my life through a short video, which is fitting, since short videos were about to ruin me in a completely different way. It was a clip about empty nest villages, an old woman dividing a single bread roll into 3 portions to make it last the day. I watched it twice, then I watched 11 more like it. Then at 2 in the morning, I told Pan Long to bring the car around in the morning. We drove to a village called Liuje with 2 trucks of rice, flour, and oil, and it took 6 hours, the last 40 minutes of it, on a road that Pan Long described professionally as not a road. The first house had 1 old woman in it, 81. Her son works in Shenzhen and sends money twice a year and calls at New Year. She would not let us in until she had swept the step, which took 4 minutes, and we stood there and let her do it because Pan Long put a hand on my arm and shook his head when I moved to help. She will be embarrassed for a month, he said quietly. Let her sweep. Inside there was a bread roll on the table with a knife next to it, and it had been cut into 3 sections, not sliced, portioned. 1 for that morning, 1 for midday, 1 for the evening. I had seen that in a video. I had thought, watching it on my phone in a heated apartment, that the video was probably staged for engagement. 2 sacks of rice, 2 of flour, 2 bottles of oil, and 5,000 yuan in cash, to every household. Pan Long carried and I counted, and Guo Ming wrote the names. There was already a man doing this. Badly. With his own money. For 6 years. Pan Guoliang is about 50, and he grew up in that village as an orphan, eating a bowl in one house and a bowl in the next until he was old enough to leave, and he has been paying it back ever since in installments he cannot afford. He walked the whole route with us and told me things I did not want to know. He told me about arriving at a house to find the children of the household dividing up their mother's savings at the table in front of her, arguing about the split while she sat in the corner and did not say anything, and that when he objected they told him it was a family matter. He told me the worst part is not the poverty, the worst part is the silence. That most of them go entire weeks without speaking to another human being, and that when he arrives they will talk at him for 2 hours without stopping and then apologize for it. Then he said the thing that built an entire company. Half of them can still work, he said. They do not want charity, they want a job. Sweeping, feeding chickens, anything with a wage attached and somewhere to be in the morning. I stopped in the middle of a dirt track. Give them work. They get an income and they get company, and the foundation stops being a bucket with a hole in it. I made him head of the foundation's survey team on the spot. 10,000 a month plus expenses and a car and 2 staff. He refused twice, so I bought his fruit instead. His entire remaining harvest, all of it, at 50,000 yuan, on the stated grounds that I needed gifts for 200 employees, and his was the nearest orchard. He stood in his own field holding his phone and looking at a number and did not speak for a while, then accepted the job. Every household got 2 sacks of rice, 2 of flour, 2 bottles of oil, and 5,000 yuan in cash. There was a local man there already doing this, badly, with his own money, for years, Pan Guoliang. He had grown up an orphan in that village, eating a bowl in one house and a bowl in the next, and he had never stopped paying it back. He told me things I did not want to hear. He told me about children dividing up their parents' savings in front of them, at the table, arguing about the split while the parents watched. I made him head of the foundation's survey team, 10,000 a month plus expenses. Then I bought his entire remaining fruit harvest, all of it, for 50,000 yuan, on the grounds that I needed gifts for staff, and he stood in his own orchard holding his phone and could not speak for a while. His daughter Pan Qin is a kindergarten teacher. She came to work at the orphanage. And Pan Goliang gave me the idea that eventually built a second company, which is that many of these old people are perfectly able to work and do not want charity, they want a job. Sweeping, feeding animals, something. Give them work and they get income and company both, and the foundation stops being a bucket with a hole in it. I wrote that down, actually wrote it down, in a notebook, like everyone else in my life. While I was away for 4 days, my company grew a live streaming department. I want to be precise about the sequence, because the sequence is what killed me. Guo fans started selling on live stream from the workshop floor. Xinhua, who had blanket authority over anything that was not a major decision, approved it. Then she approved hiring an entire streaming team. She made both of those decisions by consulting a note in her book, and the note said, in my handwriting, that every project carries risk, and one should not fear loss. First day, 18,000 yuan. The viewers demanded to see the dog kennels. They demanded it every single stream. It became the most requested feature of a clothing broadcast in the history of the platform. And while she was setting the stream up on my office computer, Xinhua found a folder of audio files. 10 songs that do not exist on any music service in this world, sung by a voice she recognized immediately. She closed the folder without playing the rest and never mentioned it because she decided that if I had not released them, there must be a reason. I came back to a report. 3 new dealers, a streaming team turning over 30,000 yuan a day, and a new coffee unit that was both larger and cheaper than the one it replaced, because Guo Fan had brought a group of well-connected women in for coffee, and one of them turned out to own the building and gave us 20% off. In summary, Xinhua said, reading from her own document, every improvement this week is attributable to Guo Fan. Lin Bo was drowning in work by then, and Lin Bo is where the money started coming back. His mentor Guo Guang joked one afternoon that maybe Mr. Guo would order him to redecorate an apartment next, and the phone rang, and it was a new workshop. Then the coffee shop. Then 3 more branches, then the landlady's retail units, a first-year designer with 1.5 million in a quarter. His supervisor started switching the air conditioning on for him personally and suggesting he take a nap in the break room. I countered the streaming sales with what I still think is my finest single instruction. Sun Bing, the streaming lead, proposed discounts to drive volume. No, I said, raise the online price 20 yuan above the shop price and put that fact in the largest font in the stream header. He went away and told his team that it was like standing in your own noodle shop announcing that the place next door is tastier, then adding that the place next door is closed. They did it anyway. Sales went up. Viewers decided it was the most honest thing they had ever seen a brand do. Then the special mission came due, and the system gave me 3 unlocks. The cap on the number of companies I could own was removed entirely, and at 5 I would be permitted to form a group. Personal privileges were granted, and the wording is burned into me. It has been detected that the host is too foolish, having converted only tens of thousands. Housing up to 2,000 a month may be drawn from the fund. A company vehicle for personal use is permitted. Medical costs are covered. And the charity allocation rose from 10 to 20% of the fund. I was permitted to establish an actual foundation, and money sitting in the foundation account no longer counts as fund money and carries forward between cycles. I moved into a proper apartment at 1,900 yuan a month in a complex called Changbai Jingyuan. The Pan family moved into the flat directly opposite mine, which meant Pan Lingling could still deliver dinner without stairs, a detail she had been extremely worried about and had negotiated in advance with her mother. Then Tiange Club came to sign a contract, and that is when I found out who I had been fighting. Chiang Jianhua is the son of the man who owns Hualing Mobile and Tigerhead Livestream. The deal was exclusive rights to run Qianlong tournaments, plus first refusal on our future titles, in exchange for front-page placement on the largest streaming platform in the country. Guo Han spent the entire meeting hunting for a mysterious player he wanted revenge on. Ma Kai, sitting 2 chairs from me, never said a word, and then I built a video platform for one reason, which was to bury Guo Ming's account. It had 10,000 followers by then, and dealers were coming to us because of it. So I founded Boring Short Videos, and I exiled both Guo Ming and Guo Fan into it. Guo Ming as director, Guo Fan as his deputy, which removed the 2 most dangerous men in my factory in a single stroke. The rules I set for it were, I thought, unsurvivable. No promotion of any kind. No dancing without formal choreography training. Game streams capped at 2 hours and forbidden between 8 in the evening and 8 in the morning. No gift over 10 yuan, and absolutely no beauty filters because we stand for authenticity. And if nobody wants to stream on it, hire streamers onto the payroll, salaried, lecturers, fitness instructors, lawyers. I called it boring because the entire point was that it should be boring. Who watches short videos? I said, except people who are bored. Guo Ming was silent for about 4 seconds. Then he explained to Guo Fan in the car that the boss was building a platform where nobody can buy attention with their face, where you can only rise by actually knowing something, and that the name was a deliberate satire of every other platform in the country. He wrote a manifesto. I have read it. It is genuinely moving. Then he went out and started recruiting streamers, and the recruitment is where the whole thing got away from me. My rules were designed to make the job unbearable. No filters, no dancing without formal training, no gifts above 10 yuan, which kills the entire economy of every other platform in the country. 2-hour minimum broadcast, 4-hour maximum, and nothing at all between 8 in the evening and 8 in the morning. And salaried. That was the part I was proudest of. 100 to 400 yuan an hour, paid by the platform, based on qualifications rather than popularity. I had reasoned it out precisely. Nobody wants to be paid a flat rate to teach. Everybody wants the lottery. Streamers chase the possibility of the big night, and I had abolished the big night. Guoming took the pay scale, read it twice, and hired a woman with a doctorate in agricultural science within 4 days. Then a retired judge. Then 2 chefs. Then a man who restores traditional lacquerware and has 3 apprentices left in the entire province, who cried on the phone because he had spent 2 years trying to find anybody willing to film what he does. The reviewers were the real cost, and the reviewers were Guoming's idea, and I approved them because they sounded expensive. Every applicant has to submit credentials, diplomas, transcripts, licenses, employment history, and a review team checks all of it, then watches the broadcasts and pulls anyone teaching something incorrect. He offered enormous salaries for those posts and still only filled half of them before the new year because the people qualified to audit a lawyer, an agronomist, and a pastry chef are not standing around waiting for work. I read that hiring report and felt genuine peace. Half-staffed, expensive, slow, no promotion budget. 10 streamers on the entire platform and a video feed so empty that the app opens on a blank screen. And then it turned out that 100 yuan an hour, guaranteed, with no filters and no begging for gifts, is the single most attractive offer that has ever been made to a person who actually knows something and has spent their life being told that nobody wants to hear it. The Winter Sports Day was 200 people and a budget of 2.2 million with hired performers and a cheerleading squad. I replaced the points system with sealed boxes. 3 events entered earns you 1 draw, maximum 2, and managers receive 2 automatically for administrative reasons that I invented on the spot. I drew numbers 1 and 2, personally, in front of 200 people, and pulled 2 phones at 6,700 yuan each. The owner of 5 companies cheated at a raffle for 13,000 yuan, and if that ever gets out, I will simply move abroad. Personal assets after that, 40,000 yuan. Let me put that next to something. That week I signed off 1.4 million on machines, 2.2 million on the sports day, 930,000 on a dormitory, 800,000 on coffee equipment, 5 million yuan in 7 days. One man's signature, 40,000 yuan in my own account. My driver earns 10,000 a month. My assistant earns 14. My chef won 50,000 yuan for walking. I could not buy the sofa in my own reception area. I did the sum again on the way home in a car I do not own, and then I stopped doing sums for a while because it was not helping. The cat cafe opened in the same period and I did not see it coming at all, and I would like to record for posterity that it was originally a charity measure. 15 cats came out of Panguozhong's shelter, vaccinated, health-checked, temperament tested, and specifically selected for being the calm ones because Panguozhong refused to send an animal into a room full of strangers unless it would genuinely be fine there. 40 guests on the first day, 2,000 yuan. 2,000 yuan is nothing. 2,000 yuan is a rounding error. I was delighted. Within a week, it was 200 guests a day and 12,000 yuan, and there was a queue on the pavement in February of people waiting outside in the cold to go and sit with a cat for an hour at 50 yuan for the coffee. I went and stood across the street and watched it. Nobody in that queue was cold because everyone in that queue was photographing themselves being cold and posting it, which is a thing I have never understood and will never understand. Then the franchise clothing shop opened 2 doors down. It was one of the dealers who had signed up under the new brand terms. And whoever managed it was clever, because within a fortnight, there was a card in every shopping bag. Buy 2 garments, receive a 50 yuan voucher for the coffee shop next door. I stood on that pavement for a long time. My garment factory was feeding my coffee shop. My coffee shop was feeding my garment factory. Neither of them had asked me. Both of them thought they were being helpful. I had built an ecosystem, accidentally, against my own explicit intentions. Out of 2 businesses I had specifically designed to fail. I capped it that afternoon. 1 cat cafe and 1 maid cafe per city, absolute maximum, and every other branch opens as a plain shop with a 50 yuan Americano and no animals and no theme and no reason for anyone to photograph anything. It is the only defensive line I have ever successfully held, and I hold it to this day, and every single person who works for me believes it is because I am protecting the scarcity value of the brand. 15 cats from the shelter, fully vaccinated, temperament tested, 40 guests on day 1 and 2,000 yuan in takings, which was fine, 200 guests a day within a week, and 12,000 a day, which was not. Then a franchise clothing store opened next door and started handing out 50 yuan coffee vouchers with every 2 garments purchased. I stood on that pavement and watched my own 2 businesses feeding each other and understood that I had built an ecosystem. Extreme Survival arrived in March. Ma Kai brought me the design, and I did not read it properly because I had learned by then that the more carefully I read, the worse things went. A competitive mode with ghosts and biochemical rounds, and a survival mode, 100 players, 1 map, a shrinking circle. I looked at the phrase shrinking circle for a while, and something moved at the back of my skull, some very old memory from a life that does not exist here, and I chose to ignore it. 2 young men in a villa played the test build for 11 hours and could not stop. Guo Han hired 2,000 people at 10 yuan an hour to fill the servers so he would have someone to play against and got eliminated by them repeatedly. In this game, he complained to Chang Jianhua, my money is worthless. The absolute maximum I can spend is 18 yuan and 10 fen a month. I heard about that and laughed for a genuinely long time, and it is the last time I laughed about that game. Mingri Group was formed that spring because I had 5 companies and the system permits a group at 5. I made Chen Hao general manager of the garment factory. Mr. Guo, I barely finished school. Sun Yong knew nothing about games either, I said, which was intended as reassurance and was in fact a confession. Lin Xiaoming transferred to the group headquarters canteen and was visibly relieved because it meant he no longer had to lead the morning run. The maid cafe was Sun Xin's idea, and Sun Xin is a cosplayer who runs 3 of the largest costume groups in the province. 118 yuan entry, which includes an Americano and 2 hours board games and staff who will play them with you. Booked out 5 days in advance within a week. People came from other cities. 20,000 yuan a day. I capped it. 1 cat cafe and 1 maid cafe per city, maximum, and every other branch is a standard shop. That is the only defensive line I have ever successfully held. The new office building is where I made my most beautiful mistake. The top 10 floors of a tower had been empty for 4 years. Not slow, empty. Every company that took space there had folded inside 6 months, 4 in a row. The building had a reputation, and in this country, a reputation like that is worth about 40% off. Guo Ming was horrified. Mr. Guo, people say that floor is cursed. I would like to see, I said, whether my company can go bankrupt within 6 months. I took 5 floors, and I would like to describe the viewing, because Guo Ming very nearly saved my company by accident. The agent walked us out of the lift on the 22nd floor and stopped talking, which is not what agents do. 4 years. He said eventually. 4 tenants, none of them lasted 6 months. What happened to them? The first one was an import business, folded, then a training school, folded, then a small pharmaceutical distributor, folded. Then an advertising agency that folded so fast the sign was still under warranty. Guo Ming had gone very quiet next to me. There is nothing structurally wrong with the building, the agent added quickly in the voice of a man who has had this conversation 100 times. The wiring is new, the lifts are serviced, it is purely a question of, reputation, I said. Reputation. Guo Ming took me aside by the window. Mr. Guo, I have to say this. Everyone in that industry knows about these floors. My brother-in-law would not work up here. There are people who will not take a meeting up here. Do you believe that? He thought about it honestly, which is one of his best qualities. No, he said, but I do not have to believe it for it to cost us staff. I would like to see, I said, looking out over a city that I was systematically failing to lose money in, whether my company can go bankrupt within 6 months. He laughed. He thought it was a challenge. He wrote it down later as the boldest thing he had ever heard a boss say, and he repeated it to Guo Fan in the lift, and Guo Fan repeated it at dinner. Within a week, it had become a small legend in a company of 200 people that their boss had walked into a cursed building and dared it to try. 5 floors, 10 years of empty floor space at a 40% discount because of ghosts. And then, while I was signing, Guo Ming negotiated. I watched him do it. He did not raise his voice once. He simply mentioned, gently and repeatedly, that the space had been empty for 4 years, that we were taking 5 floors and not 1, that we would sign for a long term, and that the landlord's alternative was another 4 years of the same. 2 yuan a square meter came down to 1.1 million yuan saved in a single conversation by a man from a cutting floor who cannot use a spreadsheet. He came back to me glowing and told me he had a small gift for the company. Then he bought money trees and buried temple talismans in the soil of every one of them, on every floor, at his own expense, and did not tell me until much later, and I have never had the heart to bring it up. Then Guo Ming negotiated the rate from 2 yuan a square meter down to 1.6 and saved me 1.1 million yuan. I had one moment of relief in that entire building, and I received a knife in the back before the moment was over. Extreme Survival launched with no promotion whatsoever, exactly as I had ordered, and I downloaded it myself out of a kind of professional curiosity. I want to walk you through the next 4 minutes carefully. I picked the competitive mode first. 2 teams, one side attacking, one side defending, planting an objective. Fine, ordinary. And then I noticed the movement and the recoil pattern, and the specific way the ghost mode worked, where one side cannot be seen except as a shimmer, and I stopped breathing properly. Then I opened the other mode. 100 players, 1 aircraft. You pick where you jump, you land with nothing, and you find your own weapons in houses. And then a circle appears on the map, and the circle shrinks, and everything outside it kills you. I sat at my desk in an office I had bought because it was cursed, and I played a game from my previous life. Not similar to, not inspired by, the thing itself, both of them, whole, complete. Built from nothing by a man in a rented office in Chen City who has never heard of either one and never will. I called him. Ma Kai. When we met, you told me the games you worked on had lost money. Yes, Mr. Guo. You told me you had a record of failure. There was a pause, and I could hear him working out whether he was in trouble. I was the lead planner, he said carefully. But the decisions were made by the previous 2 owners. I raised objections. I was overruled. I could only advise. You were overruled. On everything that mattered, yes. I looked at the ceiling of my office for a while. Thank you, I said. That is very clear. Then I put the phone down on the desk, screen up, and I sat there and worked through it properly for the first time. I had found a generational talent in a bankrupt building. I had promoted him within 40 minutes of meeting him. I had doubled his salary, handed him a 500,000 yuan budget, told him to take his time, given him complete creative authority with no supervision, and defended him in front of his own staff. I had done all of that specifically and exclusively because he had once lost an argument to 2 idiots. There is a kind of failure that you can only achieve through hard work. I picked the phone back up. One more thing. The next project does not go to you. Understood, Mr. Guo. Who is leading it? Sun Yong. There was a much longer pause on that one. Sun Yong, he said, has been in the games industry for 11 months. Yes. And has no design background at all. Correct. Understood, said Ma Kai, and I could hear him rebuilding the entire thing in his head into something wise, the way they all do. You want a genuinely outside perspective. You do not want us repeating ourselves. I hung up before he could finish talking himself into admiring me. I downloaded it myself out of a kind of professional curiosity and played 3 rounds and went completely white. It was 2 games from my old life, both of them, whole. The competitive mode and the survival mode, reproduced from nothing by a man who had never heard of either. I called him immediately. Ma Kai, you told me you were an architect of failures. You told me the games you worked on lost money. I was the lead planner, Mr. Guo, he said, sounding confused, but the previous 2 owners made the decisions. I could only advise. I sat with the phone against my ear for a while. For 8 months I had been carefully protecting, promoting, funding, and shielding a genuine generational talent, under the impression that he was a professional disaster, because he had once lost an argument to 2 idiots. Understood, I said. Thank you. Then I hung up and made a decision. The next game goes to Sun Yong. Sun Yong, who cannot read a design document, who came into the industry a year ago, and it will be in a dying genre. Meanwhile, Chang Jianhua, who is a good man in the worst possible way, looked at the fact that Extreme Survival had no marketing at all and drew the obvious conclusion. They have no money for promotion, he told Guohan. Everything they earn is going into the boss's other companies. Look at the size of that factory rebuild. And he decided to help. He got 4 front-page slots on Tigerhead livestream and put 4 of his club players on them. Chen Jing, the sniper I had once killed in a field, sat down in front of a camera at 7 in the evening with 11 viewers, most of them his own colleagues. He ran backwards while his 3 teammates charged forward, and the chat called him a coward. Then he lay down on a hillside and took 2 headshots at range and cleared the fight without a single casualty. The chat asked what the game was. They asked for an hour. All 4 players were so absorbed they never read a single message. Guohan typed the name into the chat himself, and it was swept away in seconds. Finally, Chen Jing surfaced, saw 700,000 people in his room, and posted a title card with the name on it. 700,000 became 500,000 within minutes, and I want to be clear that those 200,000 people had not left. They had gone to download it. The chat during that hour is a genuine historical document, and I have read every line of it since, in the way you read an autopsy of yourself. It starts with contempt. Somebody asks what this rubbish is. Somebody else says the graphics look cheap. Then Chen Jing goes prone in the grass and the tone changes because the shooting feels correct, and people who play shooters can tell in about 9 seconds. Then he does the thing that sold it, which he did not plan and could not have planned. He runs away, his 3 teammates charge a building, and he goes backwards up a hill, and the chat calls him a coward for a full minute, hundreds of messages, and he does not read a single one of them because he has headphones on and is entirely inside the game. He lies down, he puts an 8-power scope on a rifle. He waits. Then he takes 2 headshots at 400 meters, 11 seconds apart, and calls the position for his squad, and the fight ends without a single casualty on his side. And a viewer types the sentence that made the game. He was not running away. He is the sniper. That is a role. This game has roles. That is when the chat stops being a chat and becomes a queue. They asked for the name for an hour. Guohan typed it into the room himself from the club office, and it was gone in seconds under the flood. Chang Jianhua called the platform to have it put in the room title and could not get through at 11 at night to a company his own father owns. Chen Jing finally surfaced between matches, took his headphones off, looked at the counter, and said a word he had to apologize for afterwards. Then, he made a title card and put the name on it in the largest font available. He stayed on past 3 in the morning after that, unpaid, unasked, on his own initiative, opening custom rooms so that viewers who had just downloaded it would have somebody to play with, and teaching them how the movement worked, because in the first 8 hours the servers were empty and the matchmaking was filling every lobby with bots. He taught 200,000 strangers how to play my game for free while I was asleep. In the morning, Ma Kai opened the dashboard and rubbed his eyes and checked the date. 1 million downloads overnight, 4 million yuan. He decided to wait 1 day before telling me, so the figure would be stable and the news would be cleaner. I have thought about that decision a lot. 1 day. If he had called me that morning, I would have had 26 hours to spend 4 million yuan, which is difficult but not impossible. He was being considerate. By midnight, the room was at 1 million. Chen Jing stayed on past 3 in the morning, of his own accord, unpaid, opening custom rooms so viewers could play with him and teaching them the movement techniques he had worked out himself. In the morning, Ma Kai opened the dashboard and rubbed his eyes. 1 million downloads overnight, 4 million yuan in revenue. He decided to wait a day before telling me, so the number would be stable. I found it myself, standing in an industrial park with 2 dogs on leads. I had gone out for a walk because there was nothing left to do. Everything was bought. And I ran into Guo Ziyong, who told me another tenant was terminating their lease and that it was, in a way, my fault. Your benefits spread through the park, he said, not unkindly. Their workers compare their day to your day. They have stopped being willing. I stood there and apologized to him, and I meant it. Then I asked whether he could hold the empty unit for me, because a vacant unit is a shoe workshop, machines, staff, rent, renovation. And then I looked at the panel, and 4 million yuan had appeared out of nowhere. I called. Ma Kai. How is Kangshui revenue today? Mr. Guo, you already know? Know what? Extreme survival. 1 million downloads overnight, over 4 million in revenue. Mr. Guo, based on the curve, this game is going to be enormous. Each of those sentences landed on my chest like a dropped weight. I opened Tigerhead Livestream. 4 streams on the front page, and one of the names was TG Lord Gan Jing. The Tyrant's Man, the same one. He had ruined a settlement for me in one game and had now followed me into the next one. I put the phone face down on the table and sat in an empty office for a while. Then I opened my spending notebook, which by then was more of a ledger of grief, and started writing. A shoe workshop, a company annual meeting, the 13th month salary, year-end bonuses, awards. And here is where I want to introduce you to the best idea I ever had, which is that you cannot give out an award for outstanding employee. Think about it. My people are already working like the building is on fire. If I hand a man a certificate for excellence, he will work harder, and the harder he works, the poorer I get. So I invented other categories. Best Pacer Award for the man who leads the morning run every day without fail. King of Appetite, Model Couple, Lifelong Bachelor, Most Caring, Hardest Worker, which I nearly cut and then kept because it sounded harmless. 50 winners at 50,000 yuan each. The professional host, Guan Chang, read the running order backstage and came to find me to check that the document was not a draft. Since when, he said, is consistent front-runner an award? The annual meeting was at the Emperor Hotel. Every company had its own section. Changfeng, Kangshui, Nanhe, the Pet Park, boring short videos, and the foundation team. There was a banner, Mingri Group annual meeting, under it a stage, and Guan Chang invited me up to give the opening address. Nobody told me there was an address. I had reviewed that plan for spending and had genuinely not registered a speaking slot. I walked up there in front of 200 people, took the microphone, and delivered the following. Hello, I am Guo Zhou, the boss of Mingri Group. The point of tonight is to celebrate, so I will not waste your time. Eat well, drink well, there are performances later. That is all. I handed the microphone back. Guanxiang, who has hosted bosses who talked for over an hour, stood there holding it. Then he recovered and told 200 people that Mr. Guo's brevity reflected his care for his employees and got applause for it. Lin Xiaoming came to toast me with a beer, which was a mistake because I looked at the beer and then at Xinhua and told her to have the hotel replace every bottle in the room with the 1,000 yuan red wine. Down the hall, Sun Yang and Guo Ming watched the crates come in and put their heads in their hands because that was 4 team events in a row. The awards took 20 minutes and I would like to preserve a few of them. Model Couple Award, 6 winning couples, which required the hosts to say the words, "Please welcome to the stage" into a microphone 12 times, while people who work together and live together in a company dormitory came up holding hands and being extremely embarrassed about it. Lifelong Bachelor Award, 10 recipients. Guanqiang read the name of that category off the card, stopped, checked the card, then read it again with the specific bravery of a professional. Most Caring Award, 3 winners, one of whom was a security guard who had carried a colleague's bicycle up 4 flights of stairs in the rain in November and had assumed nobody had noticed. Hardest Worker Award, 4 winners, which I had nearly cut and now regret keeping because all 4 of them worked harder afterwards. King of Appetite, 1 winner, a 20-year-old from the cutting floor who received 50,000 yuan for eating, stood on stage holding the envelope and could not produce a single word for 11 seconds. And Best Pacer. Lin Xiaoming did not react to his own name. Guanqiang had to call it twice. He came up the steps slowly, took the certificate, held the microphone at arm's length like it was hot, and delivered his acceptance speech. "Thank you, Mr. Guo, for your recognition. I will continue to work hard." 11 words. Guanqiang, who has hosted men who spoke for an hour, looked out at 200 people and observed that in this company both the boss and the staff are admirably concise, and got a laugh. Then he added that the award carries a cash prize of 50,000 yuan. Lin Xiaoming, who has led 120 people around a yard at 6:50 in the morning, every single morning, for 4 months, in the rain, while genuinely hating it, put his hand on the podium to steady himself. He went back to his table and sat down and did not touch his food for a while. I watched him from the top table, and I want to be honest about the arithmetic in my head, which was that 50 winners at 50,000 yuan is 2.5 million yuan out the door, and that is a very good evening's work. And also that the man had earned it, which is a thought I did not have room for at the time and have made room for since. Lin Xiaoming won Best Pacer and gave an acceptance speech of 11 words, then found out it came with 50,000 yuan and had to sit down. Guanqiang, closing the segment, told the room that those who had not won should try again next year, then heard himself and had to work out live on stage whether one can in fact try again for Lifelong Bachelor, 2.5 million yuan. The year-end draw was a lottery, and I went first, and I pulled the single most expensive prize on the table, a phone and tablet and computer set worth over 25,000 yuan. Why I drew that particular ball is not something I intend to discuss. Personal assets, 60,000. Then I announced that the company would close for the entire month of February on full pay and that anybody who chose to work would be paid triple. Xinhua actually put her hand out to steady herself on the table. A month? People have worked all year. Go home to your families. I want to be honest about my motives because I have not lied to you yet and I am not going to start. Roughly 40% of that decision was that a closed company earns nothing. The other 60% was that I had just watched 200 people chant that they loved me and I had no idea what to do with it. The settlement landed at noon on the 31st of January. Residual detected, 2.3 million. Applying settlement method 2, 15 million yuan. I had spent 12.7 of it. I had shortened the working day, paid a month of wages in advance, given a month of paid holiday, replaced every machine on the floor, thrown a 2.5 million yuan party, and handed out 50 awards for being single. Converted to personal assets, 127,000 yuan. Total personal wealth, 190,000. New fund, 30 million. New period, 8 months. And a special mission. Reduce the fund below 50% within 4 months for a reward. I sat and looked at those numbers. Then I did the arithmetic that finally broke something in me. Tianlong now earns over 30 million a month. Extreme Survival has 4.5 million players. 40% buy the monthly pass at 10 yuan, 60% buy the weekly at 2, 80% buy the daily at 1 jiao, 50 million yuan a month. And climbing because the biggest shooter in this country before mine had 9 million players, and I was at half that and still accelerating. The single worst decision of my life was buying a game studio to win an argument with a stranger. And the most dangerous man in my organization had never been Sun Yang. Sun Yang is a hammer. He is loud and he is obvious and you can see him coming. It was the quiet one. It was always the quiet one. I wrote both their names in the notebook anyway. I am not a big man. I should explain the notebook, since it has come up several times and it is the only document in my company that tells the truth. It started as one line, Sun Yong, after the 40,000 yuan. Then Guo Ming went under it, after the night market. Then Guo Han, who does not work for me and has never met me and has cost me more than either of them. Then Deng Ji and his 63 dealers. Then Chao Wen, eventually, and Pan Guo under her, and Guo Fan and Chen Hao, who got on the list purely for repairing a machine so well that it did the work of two. Xinhua is on it. Xinhua has been on it since the week she reorganized my filing and saved 4 hours a month across the whole office. Lin Xin got on it on her first day for closing a loophole in my own employment contract in blue ink, cheerfully, and at the bottom, with a line ruled under it hard enough to go through to the next page, Ma Kai, 22 names. Every single one of them a person I chose personally, interviewed personally, promoted personally, and in most cases went out of my way to find. It is not an enemies list. That is the thing I could never explain to anybody. It is a list of everyone who has done exactly what I hired them to do, and done it better than I deserved, and it is the most successful recruitment record in this province. Linbo knocked on my door that same week and changed my life, and neither of us noticed. He had come to thank me. 6 months of orders, an intern turned top performer, a promotion. He had asked Guo Ming and Guo Fan and Lin Xiaoming what I liked, so that he could buy me something appropriate. The three of them took the question seriously. I know this because they described the conversation to me afterwards, separately, all three of them, each convinced it reflected well on me. They stood in a corridor and tried to think of one thing their boss enjoys. Cars, Guo Fan suggested. Everyone likes cars. He drives the company car, said Guo Ming. He has never bought one. He was offered a discount on a Mercedes and turned it down because he wanted to spend more, which we still do not fully understand. Clothes then, watches. He wears whatever is clean, said Lin Xiaoming, and he has one jacket. I have seen it in 3 seasons. Food. He eats in the canteen, said Lin Xiaoming, who runs the canteen, every day. He has never once asked me to make him anything different. He does not like lamb ribs. That is the entire body of knowledge I have accumulated in 14 months. Alcohol, said Guo Fan, hopefully. He cannot drink, said all three of them at once. They stood in that corridor for 11 minutes and could not produce a single item, and eventually went back to Linbo and shook their heads in unison. And Linbo went away and thought about it for 2 days, and concluded that a man who wants nothing must simply be given money. So he brought a red envelope. And I took it and weighed it in my hand without looking, the way you do, and it was about 10,000 yuan, and something enormous unlocked in my brain. So he brought a red envelope instead. I took it and weighed it in my hand without looking, the way you do, and it was about 10,000 yuan, and something enormous unlocked in my brain. Cash, given to me, personally, by a person, not a company. The system cannot see it. The system has never once said a word about a gift. I made him coffee with my own hands. I took him to the canteen. I asked about his family. He left that building convinced that Mr. Guo is a man of extraordinary warmth, and he was not entirely wrong, because I was extraordinarily warm about that envelope. 10,000 yuan in one afternoon. I had spent a year of my life and 26 million yuan of somebody else's money to earn 190,000, and a 23-year-old designer had just handed me 5% of that in a red paper envelope for being nice to him. And Spring Festival was 3 weeks away. Red envelopes at Spring Festival are the most ordinary thing in the world. I went home to Beiming County with a car full of gifts and a plan. The old people outside my parents' building spotted the car before I had the door open. Whose is that? A Mercedes. Several 100,000 that. Whose boy is that? The Guo family. 3rd entrance. I always said that boy would do well. He was top of his class. Somebody immediately began assessing whether I was single and whether her sister's daughter was available. I brought up a gold necklace for my mother that cost 20,000, and a tea set and good leaves for my father, and 2 outfits each, and I was scolded for 40 minutes about waste. Then my mother wore the necklace around the apartment for the rest of the evening, asking my father whether it suited her. It is fine, said my father, not looking up from the teapot. And what is that lump of rubbish worth? Several thousand? You do not understand these things. I went outside and laughed on the landing. On Little New Year, my mother took me to the square to watch a performance, which turned out to be a square dancing competition, which is the sort of information a mother withholds strategically. My old classmate Lin Chiang was there and extremely invested because his mother captained the blue team, and he offered me a meal in exchange for my vote. I watched 40 old women in matching outfits perform in perfect unison in a public square in January, and I had an idea so good I had to sit down on a cold bench. A senior performance troupe. Pan Guoliang's survey had already identified elderly people who were able to work and wanted to. I could pay them a salary. They could dance. And who on this earth pays money for a ticket to watch a square dance when it happens for free in every park in the country at 7 every evening, helping the elderly and losing money in one motion? I voted for the blue team and went home and wrote it down. Then it was New Year's Eve, and I executed. I had created a group chat before the holiday with every manager in every company in it, and I had been waiting for this specific evening the way a fisherman waits for a tide. I sent a red packet, 200 yuan, split 50 ways. Sun Yang claimed a packet. Guo Ming claimed a packet. Guo Fan claimed a packet. They fell on it like gulls, 4 yuan each. Some of them got 60 fen. Then I sat back and waited, and my phone began to make a sound I had never heard it make. Sun Yang transferred you 10,000 yuan. Happy New Year, Mr. Guo. May your business flourish. Ma Kai transferred you 10,000 yuan. Guo Fan transferred you 10,000 yuan. Xinhua transferred you 10,000 yuan. Cao Wen, Pan Guo, Lin Xin, Chen Hao, Guo Ming, Sun Pengfei. Every single manager in my group, all of them, one after another, and I am fairly sure they coordinated it in a second chat that does not include me. 160,000 yuan. I turned 200 yuan into 160,000 in 11 minutes. And it was better than every settlement I had ever completed, combined, and it did not require me to destroy a single thing. Personal assets crossed 300,000. I sat on my parents' sofa with the television playing the New Year gala and fireworks going off outside the window, looking at a screen full of good wishes attached to money, and I thought genuinely that I could not wait for next New Year. The only flaw was the messages. If they could send the money without the sentiment attached, I would be a happier man. Then my mother put 4 plates of dumplings on the table and told me to hurry up and see who gets the coin. We put a coin in one dumpling. Whoever bites it has luck all year, wealth, a smooth career, prosperity. I decided to eat carefully and slowly and as few as possible. Because luck and prosperity are, in my specific situation, a curse. I bit into the very first one and hit metal. I spat a 1 yuan coin onto the table and my mother nearly stood up. The first dumpling, look at that. My son is going to have a tremendous year. I sat there staring at a coin. It does not mean anything, I told myself. Every family in this county puts a coin in a dumpling. Millions of people find them. Nobody becomes rich because of a dumpling. Then I ate 7 more out of spite. The class reunion was on the 5th day of the new year, and I parked 4 streets away so nobody would see the car and think I was showing off, which in this county is a genuine social crime. 20-odd people out of a class of 40. Lin Qiang doing the introductions because Lin Qiang organizes things. So what are you doing in Chen City? Somebody asked. I opened a garment factory with a friend. Which is true. It is even the same story I tell my parents. I simply leave out the other 5 companies. They say the clothing trade is good money. You must have done well this year. Badly, I said. We have not had orders in months. Somebody sighed and said the economy has been sliding for 2 years. Everyone is closing. I sighed with him and thought, yes, keep sliding, faster if possible. And the moment the words poor performance left my mouth, every single face that had been turned toward me turned away, and the conversation moved on, and I got to sit in a corner and eat in peace. Best 40 seconds of the evening. Then the last guest arrived, and the entire room stood up. Deng Fan, film director. They had saved him the center seat, and they cheered him into it, and I watched his face very carefully, because I had never met a director before, and I was expecting arrogance. He looked like a man being marched somewhere. Which film did you direct? I will go and support it. The one I just finished has not released yet, he said. You will have to wait a while. They toasted him for 2 hours. I drank a soft drink and refused every attempt to make me drink alcohol, having learned my limit is slightly under 1 bottle of beer, and around midnight the whole group moved to a karaoke place and 4 cases of spirits appeared without anyone ordering them. I left at 12. On the way to the car, I found Deng Fan and Lin Qiang hugging a tree and being violently sick, with 2 female classmates standing over them holding a phone. We cannot get a taxi, one of them said. Not after midnight, not in a county town. So I took an arm and started walking Lin Qiang toward the car, and behind me I heard a scraping sound and turned around to find the 2 women dragging Deng Fan across the ground by his wrists. He is too heavy, one of them explained. And there was snow, so... In the car, Lin Qiang started begging Deng Fan for a part in his next film, and Deng Fan held up 1 finger and promised him the lead role. Then something in him gave way. What next film? He said. There is no money. There is no next film. I was watching the road. I put 35 million into that picture, he said, to nobody. It was pulled from cinemas after 7 days. 7. It took 5 million at the box office. I lost 30 million yuan, everything my family had. I braked so hard the seatbelt locked. I looked in the rear-view mirror at a weeping drunk in the back of my company car, and what I saw was not a man who had failed. What I saw was a professional, a specialist. A craftsman who had proven twice at enormous scale with real money that he can convert a fortune into nothing in under 7 days. I dumped the two of them in a hotel room without taking their shoes off, drove the women home, and was back at 9 the next morning with breakfast. Deng Fan woke up with Lin Chang's arm around his waist and a leg across his knees, remembered exactly what he had said in the car, and put his head in his hands. I brought steamed buns and millet porridge and milk, which is the correct meal for that morning, and I waited until he had eaten before I started. Can I ask about the losses? Do not misunderstand me. I am considering investing in film, and I would like to learn from your experience. He laughed without much in it and told me everything. 2 films. The first, 8 million invested, 2 million at the box office. Then he decided he had learned from the failure and put in most of his family's savings for the second. 35 million in, 5 million out. I graduated from the directing program, he said, and I genuinely believed the world was mine. Reality has now slapped me twice. Enthusiasm is not enough. It is the script, the shoot, the edit, every detail, and I did not respect any of it. If my family did not own a mine, we would be finished. Have you thought about making a third? With what? You will not be paying, I said. I am opening a film company. I would like you to direct. He stopped chewing. And then this man, who had every reason on earth to take the money and run, did the single most decent thing anybody did to me that entire year. He tried to talk me out of it. Guozhou, listen to me. I have made 2 disasters. There is a very high probability that I will make a third. You should think about this seriously. If you hire a man, you do not doubt him. Shoot it exactly the way you shot the others. He agreed in the end, and I gave him a business card, and Lin Chang, still hugging a quilt, asked whether there might be a small part for him. Are you an actor? I have only ever been an extra, he said, and scratched his head. I do not need much. 1 line. 2. I have wanted this since I was a kid. Come to Chen City in March, I said. You will be the company's first signed actor. He thanked me about 9 times, a director with 2 proven catastrophes. A leading man who has never had a line, no stars, no audience, no name. It is the worst film production ever assembled, and I put it together myself in a hotel room over breakfast, and I drove home along a frozen road feeling better than I had felt in a year. I drove out of that county at 9 in the morning with a coin from a dumpling in my coat pocket and 160,000 yuan of other people's New Year wishes in my account. Let me lay it out one more time so you can see the shape of the year properly. I started with 1 million yuan and a rented room with no air conditioning, and I lost it because a customer paid early. Then 2 million, and I lost it because 2 men cleared a warehouse for me on their own time. Then 4 million, and I lost that one entirely on my own, out of spite, in a video game. Then 8 million, gone, because the men I hired to run a dying company refused to let it die. Then 15 million, and I fought that one for 4 months with a canteen, a sports day, a dormitory, 170 prizes, 50 awards for being single, and 2.5 million yuan of red wine. And at the end of it, I converted 127,000 yuan, 190,000 yuan to my name, after all of it. After a group company, 6 businesses, 400 employees, 2 hit games, and a coffee chain. And a red paper envelope from a 23-year-old designer, and a 200 yuan packet dropped into a group chat on New Year's Eve made me more than that entire year of engineering did. I have 30 million yuan waiting for me and 8 months to destroy it, and Kongshui Games is going to earn me 100 million yuan a month while I try, and I have a special mission with a 4-month clock on it that I have not begun to plan for. So here is what I have done about it. I have hired a director who has personally converted 43 million yuan into 2 failed films, and a leading man whose entire body of work is standing near people who have lines. No stars, no promotion, no audience. A script. I have not read, and do not intend to read. I have never been more confident about anything in my life. That money is gone, I thought, all the way back to Chen City, with the heater on and the coin rattling in the cup holder every time I braked. That money is finally, definitively, absolutely gone. And I want to be very clear because I have been honest with you the whole way through, and I am not going to stop at the end. I was wrong.